Hi guys. Tonight we wander out into a landscape of snow and silence, the kind of biting cold that makes your lungs sting with the very first breath. You can almost hear the crunch of your boots on the crusted ice, each step reminding you that, if left unprepared, you probably won't survive this. But that's exactly what makes the story so remarkable: how Native American peoples found ingenious, enduring ways not just to live but to rest in conditions that would freeze most of us solid. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, let me know your location and the local time in the comments. Now, dim the lights, and let's let the snow-chilled air carry us into the story. You trudge forward, your breath forming faint clouds in the moonlight. The ground under you is white and endless, broken only by sparse stands of pine. The night is so still you can hear the distant crack of a branch snapping under its own weight of frost. The cold doesn't forgive. And yet, against all odds, entire communities once lay down on nights like these, pulling hides over their shoulders, closing their eyes, and trusting the tricks of their ancestors to keep them alive until dawn. Your body reacts to the idea instinctively. You draw your coat tighter, even in imagination. Humans are fragile things, and the body begins to lose heat frighteningly quickly in these conditions. Modern science confirms it. Hypothermia sets in when your core temperature drops just a few degrees. A mainstream historical fact stands here: tribes of the Great Plains, like the Lakota and Cheyenne, regularly wintered outdoors or in lightly built shelters across regions where night temperatures dipped far below freezing. But the solutions they used weren't just practical. Sometimes they bordered on what you'd call eccentric. Picture this. Some sources whisper of people spreading a thin layer of ash over bare skin, creating a kind of makeshift insulator. To modern ears, it sounds outlandish, almost like crocodile dung sunscreen from ancient Egypt. But quirky adaptations like that echo the desperation and creativity of survival. And historians still argue whether these practices were common realities or rare exaggerations told by early travelers, unsure of what they truly witnessed. You close your eyes for a moment and imagine lying down in that bitter cold. The snow crunches as you clear a space. You gather dry needles, layering them to form a mattress that lifts you ever so slightly above the frozen ground. You feel every poke and crackle beneath your back, but the prickly surface is better than the ice sucking warmth from your body. The night grows quieter. The stars above sharpen, almost painful in their brightness. The Milky Way arches overhead, a frozen river of light guiding you deeper into the scene. You imagine voices in the dark, soft singing, perhaps, or the rhythmic thump of a drum muffled by hides. These aren't sounds for show. They're lullabies carrying tradition, instructing children to remember. The cold is dangerous, but it is also a teacher. You can almost taste the air, metallic and sharp, as if every inhale scrapes your lungs. And yet, somewhere ahead, a faint glow rises, the promise of a fire. Sparks crackle as wood burns down to embers, and you step closer. Your fingers tingle, not from warmth yet, but from the idea of warmth. That's what survival is, really. Holding on to an idea until it becomes real. A quirky detail lingers. Travelers once described how, even in freezing temperatures, people kept the sides of tipis lifted slightly to allow air to circulate. To you, it seems backwards. Wouldn't that invite the cold? But the wisdom was there. The draft drew out smoke, preventing suffocation. Sometimes comfort wasn't about warmth, it was about breath. Historians still debate whether these first nights out on the open plains were rituals of endurance or simple necessity. Was it a test of spirit, or just another day in a cycle of living? Perhaps both. You walk further into that thought as snow crunches under your step. Your eyelids feel heavy, not from fatigue alone, but from the soft rhythm of imagining people bedding down, curling against hides, the steady hush of their breath forming a symphony of survival. The fire fades in your vision, leaving only the vast black of the sky. You lie down in your mind, your own shoulders wrapped in skins not your own, and you trust, just for this moment, that the wisdom of those before you will keep you through the night. The silence deepens, the air bites less, and you drift forward toward the next layer of the story, where snow itself becomes more friend than foe. You open your eyes to the shimmer of white that surrounds you. The cold hasn't gone away, it presses in from every direction. But there's a trick hidden in that endless field of snow. Most of us think of snow as merciless, the thing that drifts against our doors and freezes our toes. Yet here, out in this vastness, it becomes something more: insulation, a wall against the very cold it carries. You kneel down and scoop a handful. The crystals squeak as your mitten rubs them together, dry and powdery, not like the heavy slush you might know from a city street. That texture matters. Dry snow traps pockets of air, and air, as you may recall from science class, resists the transfer of heat. The mainstream historical fact is that tribes across the northern woodlands, such as the Ojibwe, shape snowdrifts into protective barriers, sometimes even sculpting low walls around their campsites. It was not just improvisation, it was wisdom learned over countless winters. You walk around such a wall in your imagination. It isn't grand, just a curved ridge, waist high, maybe taller where the wind piled it deeper. But when you step inside, the breeze quiets. The wind that whipped needles against your cheeks is dulled, muffled like sound through a pillow. It's astonishing how much warmer you feel in that pocket of calm. Now, here's a quirky tidbit to amuse you. Some accounts suggest children were encouraged to dig shallow burrows in snow, the way foxes or hares do. At first, it sounds reckless. What parent would tuck their child into a mound of ice? But pressed walls of snow reflect body heat back inward, creating a microclimate that is far less harsh than the open air. And of course, the little ones probably loved the game of building secret forts. You smile at the thought of laughter bubbling up from white mounds, even as the night howled outside. Historians still debate whether entire families regularly slept in snow shelters or if such burrows were mostly temporary emergency measures. Some argue that full communities relied more on bark-lined lodges, with snow only heaped against the walls as extra insulation. Others say those mounds were trusted sanctuaries, proving that imitation of animals was as clever as it was necessary. You brush your glove against the curved wall, listening to the crunch and shift. Imagine the smell. Snow has no scent, and yet it does. A faint metallic tang, a whisper of ozone, the kind of clean sharpness that makes your nostrils flare. Lying against that, under a sky of stars, you feel cocooned rather than exposed. The soundscape changes as you step deeper. The wind, once a roar in your ears, fades to a gentle hum. Even your heartbeat seems louder now, steady and reassuring. You press your hand to your chest and think, this quiet would have been precious to a people whose survival demanded constant awareness of sound. A sudden hush meant safety. Another thought crosses your mind. Snow walls could double as camouflage. Against a rolling white landscape, the low outlines of a camp became harder for distant eyes or distant predators to see. It wasn't just warmth that the snow offered, it was secrecy. In a way, it was the first form of natural architecture, sculpted with no tools but the hands and will of those who knew how to use it. You lie back for a moment inside this circle. The wall curves around you, not closing you in but guarding you like a ring of silent sentinels. You can almost feel the heat of a small fire, its flames licking upward, sending sparks that vanish into the stars. Above you, the northern lights might even shimmer a ghostly green ribbon, flickering as if spirits themselves were curious about your rest. The quirky truth of it all is that snow, the very symbol of winter's cruelty, becomes the savior. People learned to see opportunity in hardship. Snow was no longer just frozen water. It was a material, a tool, a partner in survival. And as you breathe deeply in this imagined cocoon, you sense how paradoxical it is. The coldest thing in the world cradling warmth like a mother's arm. Historians, of course, may continue to argue whether snow walls were a widespread custom or mostly noted in exceptional winters. But as you listen to the softened night, You realize the argument matters little. What matters is that, for one more night, human bodies survived because someone looked at a snowdrift and thought, yes, this will keep us safe. The fire flickers lower. You stretch your legs across pine needles layered on the ground, feeling the scratch, the faint release of resin with every shift of your weight. The air grows thicker, warmer, calmer, and as your eyelids droop, you drift into the next trick, the feel of hides, fur upon fur, blanketing your weary frame. The wall of snow fades behind you, and in its place comes a weight across your shoulders, the heavy comfort of animal hides. You picture yourself lowering onto the bedding, the thick pelts stacked one upon another, rough on the outside but soft where the fur brushes against your cheek. The hides creak faintly when you shift, their musky scent carrying traces of smoke from past fires and the earthy memory of the animals themselves. It's firmly established that tribes of the northern plains relied on layered bison and deer skins as the core of their winter bedding. The sheer size of a buffalo hide made it ideal. One could be cut for clothing, while another stretched into a blanket broad enough to cover a family. The hides were so dense that a few together created insulation equal to any modern sleeping bag. And here's an unusual little detail you might smile at. People sometimes placed a layer of rawhide beneath the bedding, not for warmth, but as a shield against damp rising from thawing patches of ground. Imagine lying there, half dreaming, and hearing faint drips below you. The rawhide barrier was a clever precaution, though to your back it felt stiff and unyielding. It meant the blankets above could stay dry. Researchers remain divided on whether those who lived in forested regions preferred fur-on pelts over tanned hides. Some argue that the hair trapped heat better, while others claim fur invited lice and pests, leading people to scrape it off entirely. Without unanimous records, it's a debate that lingers, leaving us to imagine both versions flickering in firelight. You press your hand into the imagined pile. The surface is uneven, some patches scratchy, others luxuriously thick. A faint animal aroma clings, softened by months of smoke curing. You might wrinkle your nose at it today, but to people then, the smell was reassurance proof that the barrier between them and frost was solid. Close your eyes again, and you feel the weight pressing down comfortingly. The hides mold to the body, sealing in the warmth that wants so badly to escape. Over you, another pelt falls like a heavy curtain, and suddenly the world narrows to your own breath, the sound of your heartbeat, and the distant hiss of wind beyond the shelter. It's easy to forget how much difference weight itself can make. Modern weighted blankets soothe us with pressure. Here, the mass of buffalo hides worked the same way, calming the mind, convincing it that perhaps the cold couldn't reach you after all. You smile softly, realizing how ancient instincts overlap with modern comforts. The fire outside sputters, sending shadows across the walls. You turn slightly and feel the fur against your skin, softer now, warmer. With each inhale, you take in that smoky musk. With each exhale, you let go of fear. Wrapped in the skins of animals that once thundered across plains, you drift deeper, safe for one more night. The air grows stiller, quieter. Beyond the circle of hides lies the heart of another secret, the fuel that burns, the wood chosen carefully, prepared long before the snow fell. And as you sink into slumber, your thoughts glide toward the next truth, that dry firewood was more precious than gold in a frozen world. You stir awake to the sound of fire low, steady crackles that seem to whisper secrets into the night. The orange glow stretches across snow and hide, flickering shadows that move like slow dancers on the walls. You know instinctively that this warmth does not come by chance. In a world of endless winter, firewood was life itself, and not all wood was equal. Archaeological evidence suggests that native families gathered and stored seasoned wood long before the cold arrived, carefully stacking it in raised piles or under bark coverings. The trick was simple but vital. Wood that had dried for months burned hotter and longer, while green or damp wood only hissed, sputtered, and wasted effort. To neglect that preparation was to court death. And there's one odd observation you might enjoy. Some people describe the ritual of knocking two pieces of wood together to listen for their song. Dry wood gave a sharp, ringing note. Damp wood thudded dully. It wasn't a scientific measurement, but it worked well enough to decide which logs belonged on the night's fire. You can almost hear it now clack, clack, like a drummer setting the rhythm for survival. Ethnographers haven't reached consensus on whether fires were always kept burning through the entire night. Some evidence points to families tending coals carefully until dawn, while others claim that groups allowed the flames to fade once they were wrapped in hides, relighting from embers when the morning frost grew unbearable. Perhaps both practices were true, varying with region, resources, and personal preference. You lean closer in imagination, stretching your hands to the flames. They sting at first, too hot against skin chilled by wind, then settle into a pleasant ache. The smell rises: sharp pine resin, earthy oak, even the faint sweetness of willow bark curling into smoke. It clings to your clothes, your hair, to every surface of the shelter, until smoke itself becomes part of the bedding. The fire talks constantly. It pops and sighs, reminding you of its fragile nature. A careless pile of damp wood could smother it. A gust through an open flap could scatter sparks dangerously. But tended well, the fire becomes more than heat, it becomes the center of the night. People gathered around, telling stories, humming chants, watching each other's faces glow and fade with the dance of light. Imagine drifting to sleep with that rhythm at your side. The crackle becomes your lullaby, irregular yet soothing. Your ears catch the hiss of sap escaping, like tiny whispers of trees remembering their summer. Your nose fills with a smoky perfume, earthy and strong, the kind of scent that lingers even when you dream. To you, firewood might feel ordinary, stacked outside your house or bought by the bundle, but in those winters, each log represented foresight and luck. Without it, blankets of hide meant little. Without it, snow walls offered only half their promise. The fire was the final ingredient, the glowing heart that made survival more than chance. You settle deeper into this warmth, stretching your legs until the heat reaches your toes. Outside, the world is silent except for the hiss of wind. Inside, the fire breathes steadily, like a companion who refuses to leave your side. And as eyelids droop again, you realize the fire itself was part of the bedding, a circle of light no less protective than the hides or snow. The night presses on, but you're ready to learn how even stones around this hearth became guardians. And so, gently, you follow the smoke into the circle of stone. You lean back from the fire and notice the arrangement at your feet, not random logs scattered in dirt, but a deliberate ring of stones. They form a circle, sturdy and unbroken, each one chosen for its weight and shape. At first glance, they seem ordinary, just rocks picked from the ground. But as you watch the flames bend around them, you begin to see their purpose. These stones were more than boundaries. They were protectors of both body and spirit. It's well documented that native families built hearths with careful stonework, ensuring that fires stayed contained and their heat was directed inward. Stones absorbed warmth during the night, glowing faintly long after the flames dwindled, so when you shifted closer, your body could draw comfort from their radiating heat. Picture yourself reaching out, pressing a palm to a stone still warm from embers, marveling at how earth itself became a silent heater. One curious custom mentioned in old accounts is that some stones were rubbed smooth over seasons of use, polished by countless hands, turning them, arranging them, leaning against them. These weren't just functional. They became familiar companions. Imagine a child tracing circles on the same rock her grandmother once touched, both of them finding safety in the permanence of that shape. Interpretations differ when it comes to whether the stones themselves held ceremonial meaning. Some ethnographers suggest that circles echoed sacred patterns, mirroring the cycles of sun, moon, and seasons. Others argue the placement was entirely practical, with no ritual intended. The truth may lie somewhere in between, where practicality and spirituality blended so seamlessly that no one bothered to draw a line between them. You look down again, and the stones seem to glow softly. Heat seeps upward, turning the ground beneath you from hostile ice into a bed warm enough to stretch out upon. You imagine lying close, hides wrapped tightly, toes pressed near the circle's edge to catch the faint radiation. Without these silent guardians, you'd face a colder, harsher night. The soundscape changes when you notice the stones. The crackle of wood is still there, but now it's accompanied by a faint hiss, as if the rocks themselves breathe. They expand and contract with each wave of heat, clicking softly, little reminders that the earth is alive under your hands. And the smell smoke drifting upward, yes, but also the mineral tang of heated stone, like rain on warm pavement. It mixes with the resin of pine and the musk of hides, until the air itself becomes a layered memory, a scent that might cling to you long after you've left the camp. Think of how stones carried fire forward. Even after flames died, glowing rocks could be lifted with sticks or antler prongs, then placed under ashes or buried shallowly to keep them hot until morning. In some cases, stones were carried from one site to another, wrapped in hides to smoulder along the way. Portable embers imagine that an ancient way of bottling fire in stone. A practical, undeniable fact. Without stone circles, entire lodges risk burning down. A misplaced spark in a tipi or a bark lodge could spread rapidly. The stones created a buffer, a barrier that channeled flame upward instead of outward. In this way, they were firefighters as much as heaters. Now picture yourself reclining against one of these warm rocks. The hide around your shoulders sinks low, and the ground feels less hostile. The stone is firm, immovable, something you can lean on in trust. Its warmth seeps slowly into your bones, reminding you that nature, though harsh, could also be a gentle ally when approached with wisdom. Some storytellers of the past added a playful layer. They swore certain stones sang in the fire, releasing high-pitched whistles when moisture escaped. Children might giggle at these sounds, pretending spirits whispered from within the earth. Whether true or not, the idea makes you smile, imagine drifting to sleep with the rocks murmuring lullabies in the crackle of the flames. The debate continues among researchers. Were these stone rings rebuilt each night as families moved, or did they remain in place, reused season after season by travelers returning to favored sites? Some argue that hearths were permanent markers of territory, while others maintain they were temporary, quick to dismantle. No clear answer survives, but in your vision tonight, the stones feel eternal, as if they've always been here, waiting for your fire. Your senses begin to quiet. The fire dies down, leaving the stones glowing faintly red, pulsing like embers in a giant's chest. You stretch your feet closer, feeling the warmth crawl upward into your calves. Then your hips, then your shoulders. The cold outside recedes, replaced by the steady heartbeat of stone. Even the silence feels different now. The stones absorb sound, or maybe they simply give you something firm to focus on, so that the vastness of the night no longer feels so threatening. You're no longer just lying on frozen ground, you're lying in a cradle made by fire and earth together. When your eyelids sag, the stones don't abandon you. They keep glowing faintly, their heat lasting longer than your awareness. You breathe in smoke, exhale slowly, and surrender to their patience. They'll still be here when dawn comes, guarding you like a circle of friends who never tire, never wander, never break. And as your breath slows, you realize the next comfort awaits. The scent of pine needles, the soft crackle of a mattress made not of feathers or straw, but of branches laid carefully beneath you. Stones may warm your front, but it is the bed beneath that guards your back. You close your eyes, the circle of stone fading, replaced by the forest floor made into something gentler, a fragrant mattress that rustles softly under your body. The story drifts onward, and so do you. The stones fade into darkness, their warmth slipping gently into memory, and what greets you next is the scent of pine. You lower yourself to the ground, but it isn't bare earth or frozen crust that meets your back. It's a bed carefully built from needles, twigs, and branches. The forest floor has been rearranged, turned into a mattress that rustles faintly under your weight. Suddenly, instead of cold seeping upward, there's softness, there's fragrance, there's a reminder that even in deep winter, green things still give comfort. It's consistently shown in early accounts that native peoples used evergreen boughs as bedding layers. Pine, spruce, and fir branches were especially valued because they were springy and aromatic, offering both cushioning and insulation. By raising the body above snow or icy soil, these makeshift mattresses reduced the loss of body heat to the ground, which science now tells us is one of the quickest ways humans can freeze. One odd observation from travelers' journals is that crushed pine needles released not just fragrance, but also sticky resin, which clung to clothing and hair. While inconvenient to wash out, it helped repel insects even in winter. The occasional stubborn bug lingered near fires. Picture yourself waking up with your coat faintly tacky, smelling of pine sap, and realizing that this sticky inconvenience might be one more secret ally against nature's small torments. Academic circles continue to discuss whether certain tribes layered moss beneath the pine as extra padding, or whether that detail was more common in northern Europe and mistakenly projected onto North American practices by early chroniclers. Some evidence suggests moss was indeed gathered, dried, and stored for bedding, while other accounts insist pine alone was sufficient. The disagreement persists, leaving you to imagine both versions, one a crackling bed of needles, the other a spongy green cushion. You shift in imagination, letting the boughs press into your back. They're not perfectly comfortable, they poke in odd places, and your body has to find the right angle. But once you do, there's a springiness, a gentle lift that feels almost luxurious compared to bare earth. The needles tickle through the hides, faintly scratching but never cruel. And then there's the smell. Oh, the smell. Crushed pine releases a perfume so sharp and clean it almost clears your sinuses. You breathe deep, and the air feels sweeter, fresher, tinged with something resinous that lingers in your nose. Imagine falling asleep to that fragrance every night, the forest itself becoming your pillow. The sound, too, is distinct. When you shift your weight, the needles whisper, a soft rustling that mingles with the sigh of wind outside. To a restless child, that sound might feel like being rocked in arms, the forest singing its lullaby. Even adults must have found calm in that subtle symphony. The fires crackle, the stones hiss, and the pines whisper, forming a three-part harmony of survival. Think of how practical this bedding was. Quick to gather, easy to replace, and renewable every winter. A small group could harvest enough boughs for an entire lodge in less than an hour, and when the camp moved, the old bedding was left behind to decay back into soil, leaving little trace. It was an early form of sustainability, practiced not from ideology, but from necessity. You can almost see it. A mother arranging pine boughs carefully beneath hides, smoothing them so her children would sleep with fewer pokes. A father returning from a hunt might add fresh branches to the pile, bringing with him the sharp, forest scent of resin. Children might giggle as they roll across the springy bed, pretending it was softer than it really was. In all these ways, the forest crept into their sleep, night after night. Some accounts even suggest that pine boughs served symbolic roles too. Certain evergreen species were considered protective, warding off evil spirits and misfortune. The very fact that these trees stayed green while all others grew bare made them feel eternal, unyielding to winter's cruelty. So to lie upon pine was not just practical but spiritual, like resting in the arms of a guardian who never shed its strength. There's a tactile memory you can almost conjure now. The feel of resin against your fingertips, sticky and fragrant. You rub your thumb and forefinger together, feeling the tacky thread stretch, stubborn against separation. You imagine how that sensation clung to their daily lives, how every object in camp, clothing, tools, even hair bore faint marks of resin, as if pine itself became part of them. As the night deepens, you sense how all these details wove together, the fire's warmth at your front, the stones glowing at your side, the hides pressing down from above, and the pine mattress lifting you from below. Layer by layer, each element guarded against the cold, forming a system as precise and elegant as any modern invention. The scholarly debate about moss or no moss fades in importance as you settle more deeply into this bed. What matters is how the pine transforms the night, how it shifts your senses away from harshness toward comfort. You feel suspended, not on frozen ground but on a fragrant cushion woven by the forest itself. You breathe again, slow, steady. The air carries pine, smoke, and the faint musk of hides. Your body loosens, muscles uncoiling after a day of trudging snow. Your ears tune to the hush of needles beneath you, the faint squeak of resin under pressure. Every sound reassures you that the cold outside is losing its hold. Your thoughts drift. You imagine stories told on such beds, elders whispering tales of spirits moving through the forest, of animals who lent their strength, of stars that guided hunters home. Perhaps children fell asleep halfway through the story, heads resting on pine pillows, their dreams carrying the scent of evergreen into a world where winter spirits were kept at bay. The fire outside dims further. Shadows stretch and settle. You curl against your pine bed, hides pulled tighter, the warmth of stones still at your feet. The circle of survival is complete for tonight, and as you breathe deeply, your body grows heavier, safer, more willing to surrender to sleep. But the night isn't only about stillness. The warmth of pine and hides is shared most strongly when bodies draw closer together. And so, the next part of the journey shows you how survival was never solitary, but communal, how huddling together turned vulnerability into strength and cold nights into collective warmth. The pine mattress sighs beneath you as the fire drops lower, shadows stretching thin across the snow. The warmth of stones lingers faintly. Hides press heavy over your chest, and resinous fragrance drifts into your nose. Yet even with all these defenses, the cold still creeps in. You feel it slinking through the seams of the shelter, nibbling at your fingers and toes, reminding you that one mistake out here means more than a shiver. And so, another truth of survival comes to you. No one slept entirely alone. Warmth was a collective effort. It's firmly recorded that many native communities treated body heat as a shared resource. Families and friends lay side by side, pressed close, sometimes so tightly that breathing synchronized, the rhythm of one chest rising as another fell. In harsh winters, warmth wasn't just an individual possession, it was pooled, exchanged, circulated like a communal fire inside the shelter. Travelers once remarked, almost with amusement, that dogs often joined these gatherings too, curling at the feet or against the sides of sleepers. Their thick coats and steady warmth turned them into living blankets. You picture it now. Children tangled together with pups, fur and hair blending, the night softened by the sound of gentle snores and soft growls of dreams. To modern sensibilities, it might seem untidy, but in that world, it was both practical and comforting. Researchers remain divided on whether adults outside the immediate family also shared sleeping space, or if clusters were strictly familial. Some accounts suggest communal lodges in certain tribes saw large groups gathered under one roof, pressed together against the night. Others argue the intimacy was reserved for kin, with neighbors maintaining distance even in cold. Without a clear consensus, the image is left fluid, sometimes a small knot of relatives, sometimes a crowded hall of bodies forming a single human furnace. You shift your imagination into that space. Instead of lying alone, you feel the weight of another shoulder against yours, the brush of fur shared between you. The air grows warmer, less from fire or stone than from the sheer presence of bodies. Each exhale adds to the heat. Each inhale carries reassurance that you are not battling the cold alone. There's a sound to this closeness too. The night is filled not just with wind or fire, but with breathing layered, overlapping, steady. Heartbeats thrum faintly through hides, tiny vibrations that mingle and merge. To a tired mind, that rhythm becomes a lullaby as powerful as any story. The smell is different here as well. Smoke and pine remain, but added now are scents of skin, fur, leather, and sweat. Not unpleasant, but intimate, earthy, human. It fills the shelter with a reminder of togetherness. You can almost imagine the comfort of waking in the night, turning your head, and hearing the soft snuffle of someone near, knowing instantly you are not alone. Think of how survival instincts overlap with emotional needs. Warmth was crucial, yes, but closeness also soothed fear. Winter nights were long, sometimes stretching more than 16 hours in northern latitudes. Alone, such time could feel endless and frightening. Together, hours blurred into shared dreams, laughter, whispered stories, even the occasional complaint about someone hogging the blanket of hides. An unusual little note lingers in oral tradition. Some elders teased that if you woke to find yourself half buried under your sibling's arm or the family dog's bulk, you were luckier than those with empty space around them. A cramped bed was proof of abundance, of kin, of companionship, of warmth. An empty bed was a colder one. Scholarly interpretations differ on whether this practice of shared heat was ritualized into teachings or whether it was simply practical necessity. Some suggest children were explicitly taught to curl together as part of winter survival lessons. Others think it happened naturally, without instruction, born of instinct. Whatever the truth, you know the result. More warmth, more life carried through to dawn. You let yourself sink into this closeness. You can almost feel another breath against your neck, the pressure of knees brushing yours under hides, the gentle shuffle as someone adjusts in sleep. It is not claustrophobic, it is comforting. You're part of a living cluster, each person a coal in the collective fire. The wind outside claws at the shelter, but here, inside, the warmth grows thick. Condensation beads on hides overhead, proof of so much breath mingling. The fire may dim, but your body does not cool. Every exhale drapes warmth over your shoulders. Every inhale steadies your heart. It's a rhythm older than memory. Even animals huddle in dens to share heat. Wolves, foxes, even rabbits curl together against frost. Humans, too, leaned on this instinct, shaping it into custom. To sleep pressed against another body was to join the same story, to tether your fate to theirs until morning broke. You let your imagination wander further. Perhaps soft words drift in the night, someone half asleep muttering a dream, another humming a tune. Children whimper, soothed instantly by a mother's arm tightening around them. Dogs stir, snorting, before settling again. All the while warmth grows, shared endlessly, a currency with no limits. The debate among modern researchers, family only, or communal lodge, fades as you experience the truth. No one survived winter's cruelty by sleeping alone. Warmth was collective, and the knowledge of togetherness mattered as much as the physical heat. Your eyes close, lulled by the slow chorus of breath. You are no longer just one body in the cold, you are part of a circle, a knot, a living organism bound together. And as your mind drifts deeper, the shelter itself expands. Above you, hides stretch high, curved into peaks, forming structures vast enough to hold entire families safe inside. The cold outside is relentless, but in here, within walls of hide and wood, warmth is held like breath in a lung. And so you drift onward, into the towering form of buffalo hide tipis that breathed with those who lived inside. The closeness of shared warmth lingers in your mind, but soon it stretches upward, higher and broader, into the towering presence of buffalo hide shelters. You tilt your head back, and above you looms a tipi, its frame of poles reaching to the stars, its hide covering swelling like the chest of a living thing. The structure breathes with the wind, sighs with the fire inside, and stands against the snow like a giant guardian, half beast, half home. It's reliably recorded in ethnographic studies that tribes of the Great Plains used buffalo hides as the primary covering for their winter tipis. A single hide was vast, and dozens could be stitched together to form a continuous shield against wind and snow. The hides, thick and durable, shed precipitation and kept warmth trapped within, while their smoky scent acquired from constant exposure to fires repelled insects and added resilience to the material. Without these coverings, the poles alone would have been skeletons in the snow. One curious custom recounted in oral tradition is the deliberate choice of which side of a hide faced outward. Some groups left the fur on, letting the thick hair catch snow like a second insulating layer, while others scraped hides smooth, preferring to treat them with grease and smoke for weather resistance. Imagine the subtle differences in how a lodge looked, one soft and furry, blending into the snow like a giant animal crouching in the landscape, the other sleek and gleaming, the surface catching moonlight like polished leather. There's ongoing debate about whether winter tipis were smaller, more compact than their summer versions, or whether size remained consistent year-round. Some scholars argue that reducing diameter conserved heat, while others insist larger lodges were retained even in winter because they allowed extended families to stay together. The archaeological record is ambiguous, leaving the question to flicker like shadows in firelight. Now you step inside. The flap closes behind you, and the roar of the wind outside drops into muffled silence. The air is smoky, warm, and layered with scents: hides, pine bedding, the faint musk of humans and dogs, and the ever-present breath of fire. You can hear your own inhale echo faintly against the tall walls. The lodge seems to breathe with you. The poles creak as the wind presses outside, but they do not falter. Each one is long, straight, and strong, harvested with care. They meet at the peak, tied with rawhide thongs, fanning out like ribs of a great beast. You imagine running your fingers along their smooth surfaces, each one seasoned and reused across seasons, a familiar backbone of shelter. The hides themselves are stitched with sinew, seams overlapping to prevent drafts. They are heavy, pulled taut by wooden stakes at the base, the edges secured against snow. When storms rage, snow piles against the walls, adding natural insulation, turning the teepee into a half-buried sanctuary. Inside, you feel the heat of the fire rebound off the hide walls, wrapping you in a cocoon of warmth. You shift and notice how sound carries. The walls funnel noise upward, so the crackle of flames, the murmur of voices, even the bark of a dog seem to rise into the dark peak. Sometimes, perhaps, it must have sounded like the lodge itself was humming softly, a constant lull. The tactile memory is strong. You reach out and touch the hide wall. It is cool, slightly damp where snow presses, but firm and reassuring. The surface smells faintly of smoke and grease, a protective film that kept the leather supple even in winter. Your palm leaves no mark, it is too thick, too enduring. Imagine how the lodge glowed from outside at night. A faint orange shimmer leaked from the seams, a lantern in the snowy expanse. To distant eyes, it might have seemed like the earth itself was exhaling light. To those within, it was proof that even when the world froze, warmth could be made to stay. Buffalo hides did more than insulate. They connected people to the very creatures that gave them life. Every winter, families lay beneath skins that once thundered across plains, animals hunted and honored. The shelter itself was a reminder of that bond. Without the buffalo, there was no warmth, no roof, no survival. A small, unusual observation survives in winter tales. Children sometimes whispered that they could hear the buffalo's heartbeat when winds struck the tippy walls just right, a deep, thrumming sound like distant hooves. Whether true or imagined, it gave them comfort, the idea that the animal still protected them, long after it had fallen. Ethnographers haven't reached consensus on whether buffalo hide teepees originated in winter necessity or year-round convenience. Some argue that hides were first used for summer portability, only later adapted into snow-resistant winter shelters. Others maintain they were designed with cold in mind from the beginning. What remains clear is their genius: light enough to move, strong enough to endure blizzards, warm enough to make sleep possible. You sit cross-legged in the center of this imagined lodge, firelight warming your face, smoke drifting upward toward the vent above. Around you, shadows move, family gathered close, voices low. The lodge is not vast, yet it feels infinite, as if the hides and poles contain more than space. They contain memory, tradition, survival itself. The cold outside may rage, but in here, it is held at bay. You are cradled by a structure alive with breath and history, one that turns winter from an enemy into a passing guest. And as you let your body relax into pine bedding, wrapped in hides, pressed against kin, the lodge's steady hum carries you toward the next discovery. The smoke flaps high above, small and simple, yet the secret to breathing through the night. The tipi rises around you like a breathing chest, hides pulling tight against the wind, poles steady as bone. Your gaze drifts upward toward the very peak, where the fire's smoke curls lazily and disappears. There, in a place small enough to overlook, lies one of the most ingenious details of all, the smoke flaps, a pair of hide triangles, humble in size, but vital in function. They shift with the wind, open or close like eyelids, deciding whether a night becomes breathable or suffocating. It's thoroughly documented in ethnographic notes that native builders perfected the art of managing airflow with these flaps. Fires inside a lodge produced not only warmth, but smoke thick enough to choke sleepers if left unchecked. By adjusting the flaps with poles from below, dwellers could harness the wind, guiding smoke upward and out, while keeping the warmth trapped within. It was a system so precise that, when done well, the air inside remained clear even while flames roared steadily. One odd little detail, passed down in stories, is that children sometimes played with the flap poles like toys, pretending they were spears or staffs. Imagine a sleepy parent rousing in the night to find the smoke flaps thrown wide open by mischievous hands, the lodge suddenly draughty and smoky at once. A scolding perhaps, but also laughter, because even in harsh winters, human playfulness never vanished entirely. No clear agreement exists among specialists about whether the earliest tipis had such flaps at all, or if these came later as refinements. Some argue early lodges had simple gaps at the top, while others believe flap systems were integral from the very beginning. The debate continues, yet what's undeniable is how effective the design proved, so much so that its descendants survive even in modern camping gear. You picture the moment. The fire crackles, smoke begins to thicken, and someone reaches for the poles. A slow push, a practiced adjustment, and the draft shifts. Suddenly the air clears, fresh night sweeping in just enough to carry smoke upward. Your lungs expand gratefully, no longer stung by haze. You can imagine the relief, the shared sigh of those gathered, spared from coughing fits and stinging eyes. The sound of smoke itself is faint, almost imperceptible, but you can sense it. A hiss when damp wood is added, a soft swirl as air moves upward, the quiet flutter of hides responding to wind. It's like listening to the lodge breathe inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. There's a smell, too, tied to these flaps. With the right adjustment, smoke carries upward without filling the space, leaving only a gentle perfume of wood smoke lingering in the hides. That scent would seep into everything: blankets, hair, even skin. For those who lived here, smoke wasn't an intruder but a constant companion, woven into memory as surely as the cold outside. Think of how clever the system was compared to stone houses or sod huts where smoke often lingered and blackened ceilings. Here, with a simple pair of flaps, air was managed like a living current. The ingenuity required no metal chimneys, no bricks, only hides, poles, and a sharp eye on the wind. Now imagine lying beneath those flaps on a winter night. You stare upward through the opening, and stars peer back at you, framed by hides. Sometimes the aurora dances, its green ribbons flickering through the gap like playful spirits. Other times, snow drifts down, a few flakes sneaking through before someone tugs the flaps closed. The lodge becomes both indoors and outdoors at once, shelter that still connects you to sky. There's an intimacy to that view. You feel part of the world outside, yet safe from its bite. You breathe deeply, knowing that a simple adjustment above your head decides the balance between suffocation and ease. And because someone is always awake to tend the fire, the flaps are never forgotten. Survival requires attention, even to the smallest details. One peculiar observation comes from explorers who described tipis as lungs of the plains, their flaps opening and closing like nostrils. While meant poetically, the image holds truth. Without those nostrils, the lodge could not breathe, and neither could the people within. The flaps were more than fabric. They were life itself, disguised as triangles of hide. The scholarly conversation branches further. Did the flaps have symbolic meaning? Some suggest they represented balance between fire and air, between earth and sky. Others dismiss such notions as romantic projections. But you, lying here in imagination, can sense how easily symbolism creeps into daily tools. After all, when a piece of hide saves your lungs each night, it feels like more than leather. The fire dims. Smoke rises thinner now, yet the draught carries it smoothly. You inhale cool air from outside, exhale warmth into the room. The lodge is balanced, stable, alive. Above you, the flaps stir in wind, adjusting minutely, never still for long. The sensation of lying here is layered. Warmth at your side, hides heavy over you, pine beneath you, and above, the slow shifting of sky through leather gates. You feel contained, yet connected, grounded, yet lifted towards stars. The flaps remind you that shelter doesn't mean isolation, it means controlled connection, letting in only what sustains you. Your eyes begin to droop, lulled by the steady breathing of the lodge. The smoke thins, the stars blur, the hides ripple faintly in wind. And as you sink deeper into warmth, another memory drifts close, the stories of nights when hunger itself became a strange kind of ally, when fasting in winter eased more than it harmed. The comfort of air leads you into the mystery of empty stomachs, and the night's lesson continues. The smoke flaps above you stir gently, letting air sweep through, carrying with it the faint tang of wood smoke and winter frost. Your chest rises and falls easily. The fire burns steadily. The hides feel warm against your shoulders. For a moment you almost believe you have everything you need. Yet one question lingers in the cold silence. What happens when food runs low? Out here, surrounded by snow and silence, hunger is not just an inconvenience, it is a shadow waiting to creep into your dreams. Historical records consistently show that during harsh winters, food stores often dwindled. Tribes living across the plains and woodlands faced seasons when hunting became nearly impossible. Rivers froze solid, and stored provisions ran low. To endure, people turned to fasting not always by choice, sometimes by design. Strangely enough, the human body can adjust to short periods without food, and in some ways, an empty stomach made sleep easier in the cold. One curious account survives in the writings of early travelers. They described how families would deliberately eat lightly before bedding down on the coldest nights, knowing that digestion itself burned energy and left them sweating sweat that cooled too quickly and risked frostbite. So instead of feasting, they sipped broth or nibbled dried meat, then let their bodies rest empty, conserving what little fuel remained. To modern ears, it sounds counterintuitive, but to them, it was wisdom. Scholars remain divided on whether these practices were conscious strategies or simply the unavoidable reality of scarcity. Some argue fasting carried spiritual significance, a way of showing endurance and humility before the spirits of winter. Others maintain it was purely practical, a side effect of meager resources dressed later in sacred explanation. The truth may be a blend of both, hunger turned into a ritual so it might feel less cruel. You imagine it now, lying on pine bedding, hides pulled close, your stomach hollow but oddly calm. The fire warms your skin, but inside there is no fullness, no heaviness, just a strange clarity. Hunger sharpens your senses, makes every sound more vivid, the crackle of embers, the shuffle of someone turning in their sleep, the distant moan of wind. The smell of smoke feels stronger to you now, almost nourishing in its own right. Your mind conjures scents that aren't there, roasted meat, hot stews, sweet berries. Yet when you breathe again, it's only smoke and pine. Perhaps hunger itself created visions, dreams of food that softened the edge of emptiness. There's a sound that lingers in hunger too, the gurgle of your stomach, low and persistent, almost like another voice in the night. You can picture a family lying close, bellies echoing the same complaint, yet no one laughing at it. Instead, the sound became familiar, expected, even oddly unifying. Think of how fasting wove itself into story. Elders might say, "The cold spirits test us tonight. Let them find us strong, not bloated." Children would hear such words and believe hunger was not punishment but trial. In this way, what might have crushed them became a lesson in resilience. One odd observation passed down is that some families chewed on leather straps softened in broth. The hides, though tough, released enough flavor and fat to trick the mouth into thinking it was eating. You picture the faint squeak of teeth on leather, the smoky taste of boiled hide, the quiet sigh of someone drifting to sleep convinced, just for a moment, that they had eaten. Modern researchers still debate whether such customs were widespread or exaggerated by outsiders who misunderstood what they saw. Some argue the chewing of leather was rare, only during the direst famines, while others suggest it was common enough to be remembered across generations. Whatever the case, the image lingers. Even the tools of shelter became sustenance in desperate times. You shift again on your pine bed, and the sensation of emptiness feels oddly gentle. Without food weighing you down, your body conserves heat by slowing. Your breath steadies, your heart beats calmly. The cold is still there, but it seems less biting, as though hunger numbs its edge. You realize now why some described fasting as survival's quiet companion, unwanted but strangely protective. There's also the spiritual side to consider. Many traditions among native peoples included fasting as a pathway to visions, to clarity, to guidance from spirits. In winter, when the nights stretched long and silence pressed close, fasting may have deepened dreams, turning hunger into doorway. A hollow stomach, a quiet lodge, and suddenly, the dream world grew sharper, more luminous. You let yourself imagine such a dream, the fire's glow fading, your body light, floating. Outside, wolves call, their cries stretching across the frozen plain. Above, stars pulse brighter than ever, as if leaning closer. Hunger, instead of torment, becomes a bridge to another realm, where survival is not only physical but spiritual. The debate among ethnographers, ritual versus necessity, blurs as you sink deeper into this feeling. Perhaps both are true. Perhaps when your belly is empty, the only way to keep despair away is to say, "This is meant to be. This is sacred." And in that belief, hunger loses some of its teeth. You breathe out slowly, and the pine mattress rustles. Around you, others doze, their faces calm, their bodies curled together. Dogs sigh at their feet, shifting in dreams. The fire hums low, smoke curling upward through the flaps. The emptiness in your belly aches, but your heart feels steadier, stronger. And then you hear it, the groan of a frozen river nearby, ice shifting in the night like some ancient creature turning in sleep. Hunger fades as curiosity stirs. You wonder how even ice, in its stillness, could become part of this survival. And so, with your stomach hollow but your spirit strangely light, you drift toward the river's groaning song, ready to learn how frozen water itself became a shield. The hollow ache of hunger fades as your mind turns toward another sound in the winter night, a long, deep groan, like an animal shifting its weight beneath the earth. You tilt your head and realize it comes not from the lodge, not from the wind, but from the frozen river nearby. The ice stretches wide and silent for most hours, yet sometimes it speaks, cracking and booming as it adjusts to the weight of snow above and current below. It is a strange lullaby, eerie and powerful, and you find yourself leaning into its voice. Archaeological evidence and historical accounts alike show that rivers played an important role in winter survival. They were not merely sources of water or travel routes. When frozen, They became natural shields, creating barriers against predators and hostile winds. Camps pitched near frozen rivers gained both protection and access. Water could be melted from the ice, fish trapped beneath it, and the reflective surface amplified faint moonlight, making night less suffocating. One odd recollection from early explorers describes how some families carved shallow depressions into river ice to form makeshift wells. By keeping the holes covered with bark or hide, they prevented them from sealing overnight, ensuring a supply of drinkable water. Imagine kneeling on the glittering surface, striking ice with stone or bone, the sound sharp and clear in the stillness, and then watching as the water below gleamed darkly before you scooped it into a vessel. Cold, yes, but life-giving. Interpretations differ when it comes to how safe these frozen expanses were. Some researchers argue rivers were reliable sanctuaries, their broad ice sheets sturdy enough to last entire seasons. Others point out the danger of weak spots and sudden thaws, suggesting that camping too near water was risky. The truth is likely that both realities coexisted. Rivers were both gift and gamble, their groaning voices warning those who dared to rely too heavily on them. You picture it vividly. Your shelter stands close enough that, in the still hours of night, you hear the ice sing. A drawn-out moan, a sudden crack, a hollow boom like distant thunder. Each sound vibrates through the ground beneath you, a reminder that the surface is alive, shifting, restless. Far from frightening, these noises become familiar companions, steady background music for winter nights. The sensory details of rivers in winter are striking. The smell is faint but present, a sharp mineral tang, the scent of clean cold, sometimes mixed with fish or damp reeds trapped beneath ice. The air above the river feels sharper, drier, the cold intensified by open space. And underfoot, the surface squeaks and groans as you tread, sometimes smooth as glass, other times rough and jagged where cracks spread like frozen lightning. For hunters and travelers, frozen rivers became highways. Sleds glided across them, footsteps carried faster on ice than through deep snow. By following riverbeds, families found safer routes through forests and plains, their paths guided by the reflective gleam of moonlight on ice. Imagine trudging beside a dog pulling a laden sled, your breath pluming in the starlight, your footsteps ringing faintly as if echoing into the depths below. A peculiar custom noted in some oral histories describes how children were warned not to stare too long into cracks within the ice. Elders told them that spirits lived beneath, ready to pull the curious down. Whether meant as literal belief or simply a way to keep little ones safe from danger, the story reveals how rivers carried both wonder and dread. You can almost see a child, leaning over a fissure, eyes wide at the dark water shimmering below, then pulling back quickly at the sharp word of a parent. Scholars continue to puzzle over the symbolic roles rivers played in winter culture. Were they seen primarily as resources, practical and physical? Or did they also embody spiritual thresholds, boundaries between worlds? Some argue the groaning ice was interpreted as voices of ancestors or animal guides. Others suggest it was regarded more simply as nature's warning system, practical cues to avoid thin spots. Either way, the ice carried meaning as much as utility. You step closer in imagination, crouching at the river's edge. The surface gleams silver under moonlight, dotted with white snowdrifts. You touch it with a bare hand, your skin sticks briefly, tingling painfully before you pull away. The cold is so intense it burns, leaving your fingertips red and tender, yet you also sense safety. This frozen expanse is a shield, an empty moat protecting your camp from wolves or strangers who would hesitate to cross. The sounds deepen as the night grows colder. Crack, boom, creak. Each one is a reminder that the river shifts even while frozen, its currents never truly still. Your ears are tuned to the rhythm, and soon it becomes less threatening, more soothing. Like distant drums, the ice speaks a language of endurance. I move, I stretch, but I hold. You imagine lying back in your lodge, hearing those distant groans. They fold into your dreams, merging with the fire's hiss, the dog's sighs, the pine mattress beneath you. Sometimes the ice sounds almost like thunder from another world. Sometimes like the murmur of a giant turning in sleep. Instead of fear, you feel awe, a sense of being part of something vast and restless, greater than yourself. For a moment, hunger returns, and you think of fish beneath the ice. Some accounts tell of ingenious traps set in rivers even during the freeze holes cut with bone chisels, baited lines dropped into black water, the catch stored immediately in snow to remain frozen until needed. You picture yourself peering into one of these holes, breath clouding the dark circle, waiting for a tug on the line, your heart racing at the promise of food in the leanest season. The tactile memory sharpens again. Your feet slide slightly as you cross the surface, the ice squealing beneath your moccasins. Each step is both daring and necessary. You balance carefully, arms spread, breath shallow. Yet when you reach the far side, you know the effort saved hours of trudging through drifts. The river gave passage as well as water, shield as well as song. As the night wears on, the sounds soften. The ice settles, its groaning voice quieting, as if satisfied with its strength for now. You pull your hides closer, pine needles rustling beneath you, the warmth of shared bodies and fire surrounding you. The river remains nearby, a silent guardian until dawn, holding its secrets beneath a frozen skin. Your eyes close slowly, lulled by the faint echo of that subterranean music, and as you drift further into sleep, another image forms, figures moving across the snow under moonlight, hunters gliding silently, their shadows stretching across the icy expanse. Hunger may still whisper, but hope flickers brighter when prey is sighted beneath a glowing moon. The river's groan fades into memory, but another sound replaces its soft, rhythmic crunches in the snow, like the heartbeat of the land. You open your eyes in imagination and see figures moving silently across the white expanse. Hunters walk carefully under the moon's pale glow, their shadows stretching long behind them, dark ribbons across the frozen plain. Each breath rises as mist, dissolving almost instantly in the dry night air. This is not just survival. This is pursuit, patience, and skill honed by generations. It is reliably established that native hunters used the stillness of moonlit nights to their advantage. The crust that formed over snow after daytime melting and refreezing could bear the weight of snowshoes, allowing swift, silent travel. Prey, however, deer, elk, even bison often sank through, slowing them down. In this way, hunters became the faster creatures, turning the harsh crust of winter into an ally. An unusual little detail found in travelers' accounts is that hunters sometimes darkened their faces with ash before setting out, not for warmth, but for camouflage. Against the moon's glow on snow, pale skin or reflective features stood out. A smudge of soot, however, dulled the shine, letting them slip more easily into the shadows. You picture a young hunter smearing his cheeks in silence, the faint scent of old fire clinging to his skin as he blends into the night. Ethnographers have yet to agree on how widespread these moonlit hunts were. Some argue they were a routine part of winter, essential for topping up dwindling stores. Others insist they were rare, reserved for desperate times when daylight yielded little. The records conflict, some glowing with praise of knightly skill, others silent on the practice altogether. Still, the image of hunters moving like ghosts across ice and snow lingers powerfully. Now you step into their trail. The air is so cold your nostrils sting. Your snowshoes creak faintly, wide wooden frames lashed with rawhide webbing. Each step distributes your weight, letting you glide over the crust with ease. Beneath your feet, the snow crunches softly, a steady rhythm in the quiet. Behind you, faint tracks stretch like scars across the glowing field. You tilt your head upward. The moon is nearly full, bathing the land in silver. Shadows grow sharp, every tree etched clearly against the horizon. The stars shimmer, but their light pales against the bright circle in the sky. Your eyes adjust, and soon you need no torch, no flame. The land itself glows, guiding your steps. The soundscape is alive, though subtle. Snow squeaks beneath your weight. A distant owl calls from a dark copse of trees. Somewhere, the river moans again, muted but present. The hunters ahead of you whisper briefly, voices carrying farther than usual in the clear air. Then silence returns, thicker than before, as if the snow absorbs sound. Smells drift faintly, even in the cold. You catch whiffs of pine from nearby forests, sharper when you brush against a branch. The air smells metallic too, like iron or stone, a reminder of the river frozen beside you. Sometimes, if the wind shifts, the faint scent of animal musk travels ahead, deer or elk moving somewhere beyond your sight. You kneel and touch the snow. It is hard, glazed with ice. Your gloved fingers slide across its surface, squealing faintly. You imagine how frustrating this crust must be for prey, their hooves punching through while you glide above. Each stumble they make leaves them more vulnerable, while each step you take feels deliberate, efficient, sure. A curious practice noted by observers was the way hunters used moonlight not only to see but to read signs. Tracks glowed dark against the snow, depressions that cast shadows under slanted light. A broken twig, a brushed branch, even the faint trace of urine frozen on the surface all became clues in the glowing night. You picture bending low, your breath fogging the trail as you decipher every mark, piecing together the story of an animal's passing. Interpretations vary about whether these hunts were solitary or communal. Some suggest lone hunters slipped into the night, preferring silence and stealth. Others describe groups of men moving in formation, signaling with gestures rather than words. Perhaps both were true solitary hunts for small game, group efforts for larger prey. Either way, the night itself became their companion, a canvas on which survival was painted in shadow and light. The chase itself you can almost feel now. Your muscles tense as you see movement ahead, a deer's silhouette against snow, ears pricked, body taut. For a heartbeat, the world stills. Then the animal bolts, hooves crashing through crust, snow flying in glittering arcs. You surge forward, snowshoes carrying you lightly, steadily. The gap narrows not by speed alone but by endurance. The deer stumbling often, you never. The sound of pursuit fills your ears, hooves pounding, snow cracking, breath gasping, your own heartbeat thundering like a drum. The cold sears your throat, but you push onward, guided by moon and instinct. Each stumble of the animal is a promise. Each step you take is a vow. And then comes the strike, an arrow loosed, a spear thrust, a moment of stillness before the prey falls. The silence after is immense. Only your breath remains, harsh and ragged. The hunters gather quickly, not triumphantly but reverently, for this kill means warmth, food, survival. They bend close, offering thanks in whispers, smoke of their breath rising like prayer into the night. The tactile sensations linger long after, the warmth of fresh hide against your cold fingers, the sharp tang of blood in the air, freezing quickly, but pungent still. The weight of meat carried on sleds, pulled home by dogs, whose breath steams eagerly in the cold. For a moment, you stand in that silence, prey secured, moon above, snow shining like silver glass. The hunt has ended, but the journey continues. You turn back toward the lodge, following the glowing trail across the frozen world. Each step homeward feels lighter, hunger replaced by hope, emptiness by abundance. Scholars may argue whether these hunts were common or rare, but to you in this imagined night, their reality feels undeniable. Without them, many bellies would have stayed empty, many fires would have burned without meat to cook. Moonlit hunts were not just survival, they were proof of harmony between human skill and the harshest season. As you reach the edge of camp in your mind, you see the tipis glowing faintly, smoke drifting upward through flaps. Inside, bodies stir, children murmur in dreams, dogs lift their heads at your approach. You slip quietly through the flap, the warmth rushing to greet you, the pine mattress waiting, hides ready to wrap you once more. And at your feet, loyal companions press close. Dogs curl against you, tails tucked, paws twitching in dreams. They are more than animals now. They are blankets with heartbeats, guardians with fur. You drift toward their warmth, ready to learn how even four-legged friends joined in the battle against winter's cold. You slip quietly into the warmth of the lodge, the fire glowing low, hides heavy with smoke, pine boughs rustling beneath you. Around the bedding, small shapes stir. Tails thump softly, noses nudge against your legs, and you feel the unmistakable heat of dogs pressing close. In this frozen world, they are not only companions but blankets, living furnaces with loyal hearts. You reach down and touch one, your fingers sinking into thick fur, and the creature sighs contentedly, curling tighter against you. It's well documented that dogs played a crucial role in native winter survival. Beyond pulling sleds or guarding camps, they served as bedfellows, spreading warmth through the night. Archaeological finds of dog bones among human burials suggest their closeness wasn't only practical, but deeply emotional. To lie beside a dog was to share warmth, yes, but also trust a kind of unspoken pact that lasted long after breath ceased. One odd little anecdote from explorers recalls how children sometimes argued over who got to sleep nearest the dogs. Parents, perhaps weary, teased them by saying, "Whoever the dogs choose is the warmest child." You can almost hear the giggles as little hands reached for tails and ears, trying to coax a furry blanket into their corner. Interpretations differ among scholars as to how widespread this practice was. Some argue that only in extreme northern tribes, like the Inuit or Cree, were dogs regularly invited into sleeping spaces. Others contend that across the plains and woodlands their presence was common, especially in winters of brutal cold. The debate lingers, but anyone who has ever curled against a dog on a frosty night knows how natural the act feels. You lie back now, letting the warmth seep in. One dog stretches along your legs, its paws twitching as if chasing prey in a dream. Another nestles at your side, its steady breath puffing against your ribs. The heat builds slowly, as if the animals pour their strength into you, your shivering body calming under their gift. The soundscape changes too. The lodge is filled with more than human snores and crackling fire. Dogs grunt softly, whine faintly, even bark in dreams. Their nails click against stone hearths. Their tails drum against hides. To someone half asleep, these noises blend into a chorus of reassurance. You are not alone. The pack surrounds you. The smells are distinct. Warm fur carries the musk of snow, of pine needles caught in coats, of meat chewed earlier in the day. It mingles with human scent until the boundary between the two blurs. When you inhale, you taste survival itself, human and animal woven together. Imagine the tactile sensations. A dog's fur against your bare hand, thick and oily from exposure, but comforting, its body heavy across your legs, pinning you into warmth. Its breath damp against your neck, hot and faintly rank but steady as a lullaby. Your muscles loosen, no longer fighting the cold but surrendering to this shared furnace of flesh. One curious detail from winter tales tells how dogs sometimes stole scraps from drying racks and were forgiven more easily in winter than in summer. "Let them eat," elders muttered. "They keep us alive when frost comes." Hunger blurred into generosity when warmth was at stake. Researchers continue to discuss whether this closeness was purely utilitarian or carried ritual undertones. Some argue dogs were sacred intermediaries, creatures bridging human and spirit worlds. Others insist the practice was nothing more than common sense. If you have warmth on four legs, why waste it? Perhaps, as often, the truth lies in both directions. Practicality clothed in reverence. You close your eyes, listening to the symphony of sleep around you. Children shift. Parents sigh. Dogs murmur in dreams. The fire whispers low. Pine needles rustle faintly. And above it all, the steady beat of hearts, human and canine, fills the lodge. The rhythm is hypnotic, as if the entire shelter is one great creature breathing together. There's comfort too in knowing these animals guarded as they warmed. Even while curled in slumber, their ears flicked at faint sounds outside. A distant wolf's howl might rouse them to lift their heads, growl low, then settle back only when danger felt far. Their presence meant you could rest deeper, knowing someone, something kept watch when your eyes were closed. Picture the scene outside. Snow drifts high against the lodge, wind clawing at hides, stars piercing sharp overhead. A wolf calls from the forest, long and haunting. Inside, dogs stir but remain pressed to you, tails flicking once before settling again. You sleep more soundly, protected by their warmth, defended by their vigilance. An odd observation made by one trader was that in mornings, when people rose stiff and cold, dogs were often reluctant to leave bedding first. They clung to the warmth, stretching lazily, curling tighter as humans prepared for the day. It seems that even in survival, dogs understood comfort as well as any person. The debate about their role, guardian, companion, or heater, may never fully resolve. But you, lying here in imagination, know that all three truths coexist. Their fur soothes, their presence comforts, their warmth sustains. Without them, nights would have been colder, lonelier, perhaps even unbearable. As your eyelids grow heavier, you realize the night is not endless. Eventually, even fires burn down to embers. Bellies ache again. Winds shift. Yet through chant, through ritual, through stories whispered in the dark, people found ways to soften the hours until dawn. And so, lulled by the warmth of dogs pressed to your side, you drift onward into another rhythm, the murmurs of dream chants, voices humming as fires dim, carrying sleepers safely into slumber's arms. The warmth of dogs fades gently into silence, and in its place comes another kind of comfort, softer than fur, subtler than fire. Voices, low at first, almost like murmurs of wind through branches, then steadier, fuller, weaving in rhythm with the crackle of dying embers. You open your eyes in imagination and see figures still awake, lips moving slowly, eyes half closed. They are not talking to each other exactly. They are chanting, voices rising and falling, like waves against the shore of sleep. It's well attested in oral traditions that winter nights often ended with song or chant, not loud celebrations but gentle, rhythmic tones. These dream chants, as some called them, were more than entertainment. They were guides, carrying listeners into rest, stitching the world of waking to the world of sleep. The repetition of words soothed the restless, much like a lullaby. One odd little observation appears in old accounts. Sometimes these chants included nonsense syllables, sounds with no fixed meaning. At first you might think of them as babble, but they worked like music, freeing the mind from worry. Children would giggle, adults would smile faintly, and soon the rhythm overtook them all. Imagine lying under hides, eyes closed, as syllables drifted over you, nonsense perhaps, but deeply calming. Ethnographers still disagree about whether dream chants were purely for relaxation or whether they carried spiritual weight. Some argue they were practical tools for soothing children and keeping order in crowded lodges. Others maintain they were sacred, designed to invite dreams, visions, or guidance from spirits. The truth may be both, depending on the community and the night. Now, you let yourself sink into one of these chants. The sound is steady, repetitive. Voices hum, pause, hum again, sometimes in harmony, sometimes slightly off, but always circling the same rhythm. Your heart slows to match it. Your breath lengthens. The fire flickers lower, and the lodge fills with the pulse of human voice. There is a sensory world to these sounds. Each syllable seems to echo against hides overhead, bouncing gently back down, wrapping you in invisible blankets. The tone is not sharp but rounded, smooth, like stones rolled by rivers. Even when words fade into breath, the vibration remains, massaging your ears and chest with its steady beat. The smell of smoke mixes with sound, as though every exhale from the chanters carries resin and ash. The two sensations blend until you cannot tell if you are hearing the fire or smelling the chant. Your senses overlap, confused and soothed at once. Touch, too, is involved. You feel the vibration through the pine bedding, faint tremors as the lodge itself seems to hum along. Dogs stir but do not bark. Their ears twitch in rhythm, tails flick faintly. Children sigh, rolling closer to warmth. Everybody in the lodge responds to the chant, whether awake or already dreaming. Picture an elder leading, voice gravelly yet steady, chanting words so old no one remembers their first speaker. Younger voices join, tentative at first, then fuller. The chant does not rush. It lingers, repeats, circles back, never hurrying anywhere. Its purpose is not progress but presence, holding everyone in a suspended moment where sleep feels safe. One peculiar note from early ethnographers: some dream chants were said to mimic natural sounds. The long whoop of an owl, the low moan of wind across plains, the crack of ice shifting in rivers all echoed within human voices. It was as though the world outside was brought gently inside, transformed into song. Instead of fearing those noises, people carried them into their dreams. Researchers remain divided on how spontaneous these chants were. Were they rehearsed, memorized, repeated night after night? Or were they improvised, shifting with mood and circumstance? Some evidence suggests fixed patterns, while other accounts describe chants as fluid, reshaped each time. Perhaps the debate itself shows their nature, both tradition and improvisation, anchored yet free. You close your eyes fully now. The chant vibrates in your chest, like a second heartbeat. Each repetition smooths away edges of thought. Worries about hunger, cold, predators all dissolve under the weight of sound. The voices do not demand attention, they invite release. There's a curious practicality hidden here too. In crowded lodges, sleep could be restless, children squabbling, dogs stirring, people coughing. A chant unified the noise, giving it rhythm, making disorder into harmony. It was survival as much as solace, keeping peace through sound. Imagine drifting in and out of half dreams, the chant still threading through your ears. You see visions, perhaps ancestors walking across snow, perhaps animals guiding you through forests, perhaps nothing more than shapes of fire dancing in darkness. The chant carries you deeper until even dreams lose their sharpness, becoming waves of sound and warmth. Smells grow stronger as your awareness softens. Pine resin from bedding, smoke clinging to hides, fur from dogs. Each scent is a verse in the larger chant. You breathe them in and exhale slowly, your body sinking further into rest. And then the chant fades, not abruptly, but slowly, syllables softening, voices lowering, until only a hum remains. Finally, even that hum dissolves into silence, leaving the memory of vibration still pulsing in your chest. The fire is low, stones glow faintly, hides weigh heavy, pine cradles your back, dogs press warm against you. Your breath has become the chant now, steady and slow. Sleep takes hold, carrying you toward dawn. But survival is never passive. Even as people drifted, they planned food hidden, fish frozen, supplies cached for tomorrow. And so the next image forms in your resting mind. Provisions stored cleverly, fish stiff as boards beneath snow, waiting like treasures in icy vaults to be brought forth when hunger returned. The hum of chants still lingers in your ears when a new sensation arrives, not sound, but taste, or rather the ghost of taste. Your tongue curls in your mouth, as if memory alone can summon food. The fire's warmth may hold you for now. The hides may press their weight. But survival requires more than sleep. It requires planning, foresight, and caches buried like secrets beneath the snow. You imagine someone stepping out of the lodge, torch in hand, crunching across the frozen ground toward a mound that looks ordinary. But inside, treasures await. Frozen fish, stiff as wood, their scales shimmering faintly under moonlight. It's well recorded that many native communities relied on caches to carry them through long winters. Fish caught in autumn, when rivers still flowed freely, were cleaned, sometimes smoked, sometimes simply frozen, and then buried in snowbanks or shallow pits lined with bark. The cold itself became a storehouse, preserving provisions without rot or spoilage. Families knew exactly where to dig, even when snow lay thick, because the land held its own invisible map of memory. A curious detail noted in the journals of fur traders is that people sometimes marked these caches with subtle signs: an oddly placed branch, a stone that looked too deliberate to be natural. To outsiders, the mound looked like any other drift, but to those who built it, it was a pantry disguised as landscape. You can imagine the small satisfaction of walking out under a clear winter sky, brushing snow from a marker only you recognize, and uncovering food when others would see nothing but emptiness. No consensus exists among researchers about whether these frozen stores were primarily communal or private. Some argue they were guarded jealously, family by family. Others believe caches were often shared among kin groups, with survival depending on generosity as much as secrecy. The evidence is fragmentary, leaving us to wonder, did hunger make people cling tighter to their stores, or did it draw them into acts of sharing? You crouch now beside one of these hidden caches. The snow squeaks under your knees. You brush away a layer, revealing bark covering a shallow pit. Your fingers pry at the frozen lid, and inside lie fish, rigid and shining, their bodies preserved perfectly by frost. You lift one, and it creaks faintly in your hands, as if the cold has turned it into a brittle stick. The sensory details are vivid. The fish is icy, its surface rough with frost. Your skin tingles painfully where it touches the frozen flesh. The smell is faint but present, a mix of brine, iron, and smoke, reminding you of rivers now locked in ice. To someone with an empty belly, that smell would be comfort itself, a promise that hunger could be tamed. The sounds of caching also linger in your imagination. The scrape of stone knives cleaning fish, the crackle of fires used for smoking, the hiss of grease dripping onto flames. Later, the muffled crunch of snow as someone hides provisions beneath layers of frost. Even in silence, the land remembers these sounds, the ghosts of survival echoing long after. One unusual practice, mentioned in northern tales, describes how some families tied strings of fish together and froze them upright in snowbanks like spears. At first glance, it must have looked odd, rows of stiff fish standing like soldiers in white drifts. Yet it kept them organized, easy to count, easy to retrieve. Imagine children laughing at the sight, pretending the fish were tiny warriors holding guard over the camp. Scholars also point out the ingenious chemistry of this preservation. Freezing alone stopped decay, but smoke added layers of defense flavor, dryness, and insect resistance. A smoked fish, then frozen, could last deep into spring. You can picture someone biting into such a fish on a bitter night, teeth crunching through flesh still firm, the smoky tang flooding their mouth as though autumn itself had been preserved in every bite. The tactile experience of eating such food in winter must have been unforgettable. The flesh stiff at first, warming slowly in hands or near fire. The taste sharp, salty, smoky, sometimes faintly sweet if berries were added in the smoking process. Each bite a reminder of preparation, of hunts and nets cast months ago when the world was not yet frozen. Interpretations vary about whether caches were also used symbolically as gifts to spirits, offerings left behind to ensure abundance. Some accounts describe families deliberately leaving portions untouched, saying they were for the animals or ancestors. Others dismiss this as romantic invention by outsiders. But the idea feels plausible. In a world of scarcity, to give away food was a gesture of both humility and hope. Now you picture the return from such a cache. Someone carries fish back to the lodge, the bundle stiff and cold in their arms. Dogs sniff eagerly, tails wagging. Children's eyes brighten, even if the meal is small. The fish is placed near embers, thawed slowly, sizzling faintly, releasing smoke into the air. The lodge fills with the scent, rich and mouth-watering, stronger than the pine bedding and even the hides. Hunger grows sharper, but also sweeter, because food is finally here. You take a bite in imagination. The flesh flakes roughly, chewy yet satisfying. Smoke clings to your tongue. Salt lingers on your lips. For a moment, hunger recedes, replaced by warmth spreading from your stomach outward. The cold outside does not vanish, but it feels less powerful. Another odd anecdote survives. Sometimes, when supplies ran dangerously low, families roasted fish bones for soup, boiling them until even the marrow gave flavor. The broth was thin, but it carried warmth, and sometimes that was enough. You can almost taste it now, watery, smoky, yet oddly comforting, steam fogging the inside of the lodge while outside snow hissed against hides. The debate among historians about whether these caches ever failed raided by animals discovered by rivals remains unresolved. Some argue loss was inevitable. Others insist careful placement made them secure. Either way, the risk was real, adding tension to each trip. Would you find your food untouched, or would the drift hold only emptiness? You stretch your body now, full in imagination, warm with food that came not from the night's hunt but from foresight and clever use of nature's freezer. Your belly calms, your muscles loosen, your eyelids droop again. The memory of hunger grows softer, replaced by gratitude for snow that, once feared, has become pantry and protector. And as you drift once more towards sleep, your mind shifts to the marks left on that snow, the broad prints of snowshoes, trails stretching across plains and forests. For even in the coldest nights, movement was survival, and the wide shoes left behind a story written in white. The snow around the hidden caches lies still, but when you look closer, it isn't blank. Across the crust, wide oval patterns mark the surface snowshoe tracks, spread like fingerprints of survival. Each step leaves an imprint larger than a handspan, light enough not to sink too deep, wide enough to carry weight across fragile ground. To follow these trails is to read the map of winter life. Every track, a sentence, every curve, a story. It's firmly established through both archaeological finds and oral traditions that snowshoes were indispensable to native communities facing long, harsh winters. Crafted from bent wooden frames, often ash or birch laced with rawhide, they distributed body weight across the snow. Without them, feet would plunge knee-deep, every step exhausting. With them, hunters and travelers moved swiftly, carrying supplies or chasing prey without sinking into endless drifts. Entire regions became traversable only because of these ingenious tools. One odd little note from early explorers describes how snowshoes were not only practical but sometimes decorated. Hunters carved patterns into the frames or dyed the rawhide lacing with natural pigments. To outsiders, this seemed unnecessary, even whimsical. But to the people who wore them day after day, beauty itself was a survival tool, reminding them that even in bitter conditions, life was more than struggle. Imagine walking through moonlit snow, your prints leaving behind not just footprints but subtle designs, art etched into winter's canvas. Ethnographers remain divided on whether snowshoes originated independently in multiple regions or spread gradually through cultural exchange. Some argue northern peoples across continents developed similar tools simultaneously, while others insist influences traveled through trade networks and migrations. The debate is unresolved, but the result is clear. Without snowshoes, many winter journeys would have been impossible. Now you picture yourself strapping them on. The wooden frames creak faintly as you adjust the bindings, rawhide straps stiff from cold. You stand, lift a foot, and feel the wide surface balance beneath you. The first step feels clumsy, your legs awkward, your stride longer than usual, but soon the rhythm comes. Step, crunch, lift, glide. You skim across snow instead of sinking, the crust carrying you like a partner in dance. The sensory details surround you. Each step squeaks faintly, the rawhide webbing scraping ice. Snow hisses as crystals scatter, brushing against your leggings. The air is sharp, so cold your breath feels heavy, yet your body warms with effort. Your arms swing wide for balance, gloved hands brushing frosty air. Every movement becomes deliberate, graceful in its necessity. The smell of resin lingers as you pass through pine groves, your steps quieted by the needles beneath. When you cross open plains, the air smells of nothing but cold, clean, metallic, biting. Sometimes a whiff of smoke from a distant lodge teases your nose, reminding you that warmth still waits at the end of the trail. Picture a group moving together, their tracks fanning across the snow like braided ropes. Hunters glide in formation, sleds pulled behind, dogs panting clouds into the night. Each step writes a record in white who traveled, how many, in which direction, carrying what weight. To those trained to read it, snow is not blank but filled with news. An unusual practice recounted in oral stories is how children's first snowshoes were made deliberately small and light, often shaped like animals' rabbit paws, bird wings. These miniature shoes taught balance and discipline, but they also carried a symbolic meaning. Each child was linked to a creature, learning to move as gracefully as their namesake. Imagine a young boy laughing as he tries to mimic a rabbit's hop, his snowshoes leaving paired tracks in soft drifts. Researchers continue to debate whether snowshoe travel was mainly for hunting or whether it also served ceremonial roles. Some evidence suggests journeys across snow carried symbolic significance, representing endurance and connection with land. Others dismiss this as over-interpretation, insisting the shoes were tools, plain and simple. Yet when you walk with them in imagination, you sense how quickly practicality and spirituality merge. To glide above snow is to feel part of the winter, not crushed by it. You pause mid-step and kneel, pressing a gloved hand to the trail. The print is clear, webbing etched into the crust, edges sharp in moonlight. You can almost feel the story it tells a hunter passing an hour ago, carrying heavy weight, perhaps returning with meat. You trace the mark and sense the life it represents, fleeting but preserved until the next snowfall erases it. The sound of a trail in use is hypnotic. Step, crunch, step, crunch, dozens of feet moving in harmony. Dogs bark occasionally, sleds creak, snow sprays faintly into the air. At night, under stars, the rhythm becomes trance-like, carrying travelers forward even when muscles ache. The snowshoe path itself becomes a song, one you feel in your bones as much as hear in your ears. The tactile sensation of snowshoeing lingers in your imagination. The straps press tight against ankles, cutting slightly if adjusted poorly. The wooden frame bumps against your calves when you stumble, yet the reward outweighs the discomfort. Distance covered, fatigue reduced, survival assured. You marvel at the ingenuity of the design. Simple materials, endless benefit. Another curious observation from old records. When camps moved, snowshoes were sometimes propped outside lodges in neat rows, forming fences of bent wood. To outsiders, it looked decorative, but it served a practical role drying rawhide, keeping frames off damp snow, ready for the next journey. In the flicker of firelight, these rows of shoes looked almost ceremonial, like gateways lined with guardians. Scholars may argue origins, purposes, or symbolic roles, but you, walking in imagination, know their truth. Without snowshoes, survival faltered. Each track pressed into snow is a signature of resilience, an autograph written across winter itself. As you step back toward camp in thought, you look down at the trail you've left. It stretches long behind you, curving into darkness, wide prints glowing faintly in moonlight. The story remains etched in snow, at least until morning winds erase it. And when you return to the lodge, brushing frost from your shoulders, the firelight greets you again. Dogs stir, children snuggle deeper, hides rustle faintly. You step inside, and your gaze catches another kind of light, one flickering, greasy, casting shadows that dance unnaturally fast. Torches, made from bear fat and bark, sending smoky beams into the night. The story moves forward, carrying you from snowshoe trails into the glow of these crude but vital flames. The prints of snowshoes fade behind you as you step into a different glow. The fire in the hearth burns low, only faint embers gleaming. But above them, in hands and hung against walls, other flames flicker torches, crude yet clever, made from bear fat soaked into bark or reed. Their light is not steady like a hearth fire. It stutters, it smokes, it sends shadows darting like restless spirits across the hide walls. You squint in their glow, the lodge transformed into a cave of moving shapes. It is firmly established in accounts from the subarctic and northern plains that fat rendered from animals, especially bear, was precious fuel. Not only was it eaten or mixed into food, but it was pressed into service as light. Strips of bark or bundles of dried grass, dipped into the grease, caught flame and held it far longer than plain wood could. In the long nights of winter, these torches extended the hours of sight, letting people work, eat, or move when firelight alone was too weak. One curious custom mentioned in scattered records is how children were cautioned never to play too close to the dripping fat. The burning grease hissed and spat, sending droplets onto floors or bedding. Elders warned that each spark was a reminder of the bear's spirit, quick to punish careless hands. Imagine the thrill of watching such a torch flare, sparks leaping, smoke curling, while children huddled wide-eyed at the edges of its glow. Researchers remain divided on just how widespread the use of fat torches was. Some argue they were common in every northern camp, a basic necessity. Others suggest they were used more sparingly, in ritual or emergency, since fat itself was too valuable to waste. No agreement has been reached, but the presence of these flickering lights in oral stories suggests they were memorable enough to leave an impression. You hold one now in imagination. The bark handle is greasy, slick beneath your glove, the flame trembling at the end. Heat licks your hand, smoke curls thick into your face, carrying the heavy, unmistakable smell of animal fat. It is not pleasant, not like pine resin or clean wood smoke. It is acrid, cloying, oily, and yet somehow comforting because that smell means you are not stumbling in the dark. The sound is distinctive too. Unlike wood crackling merrily, a fat-soaked torch hisses, as if whispering angrily. Sometimes it sputters, sending streaks of light briefly brighter, then dimmer. The lodge becomes a theater of shifting illumination, faces vanishing and reappearing as shadows dance across hides. Your own breath looks like smoke, as it mingles with the oily haze. Imagine stepping outside with such a torch. The world beyond the lodge is pitch black, the moon hidden behind clouds. You raise the flame, and snow glitters suddenly, like countless shards of glass. Trees loom from the darkness, their branches clawing against the night. The torch throws light in uneven bursts, exaggerating every shadow. Each tree becomes a looming figure, each snowbank a crouched beast. Your pulse quickens, but you keep walking, the greasy flame guiding your way. An odd anecdote from oral tradition tells how hunters sometimes rubbed soot from torches onto their faces before night hunts. The black streaks dulled reflections, but they also marked the hunters as bear-like, borrowing the animal's spirit for strength and stealth. Whether practical camouflage or ritual homage, the gesture added another layer of meaning to the flames. Scholars still discuss whether bear fat light was linked to ceremony. Some evidence suggests it was used during midwinter rituals, when the longest nights demanded both illumination and symbolic fire. Others argue this is speculation, pointing out that fat was used wherever needed, sacred or mundane. The ambiguity leaves room for imagination, perhaps both were true, depending on moment and mood. You lower the torch and study its flame. The edges of the bark blacken and curl. Drops of grease fall with faint pops, sizzling into snow when carried outside. Each drop leaves a dark crater, small but visible in the morning. A trail of marks across snow shows where torches once burned, a breadcrumb path made not of bread but of oil and smoke. Inside the lodge, torches added more than light. They created atmosphere. Their uneven glow made stories feel alive, shadows of animals and spirits flickering in rhythm with the teller's words. Children gasped as figures seemed to move across walls, while adults nodded knowingly, aware that imagination was as important to survival as skill. The tactile memory is strong. Your hand smells of grease, your sleeve stained where the torch dripped. Even after extinguishing it, the scent lingers stubbornly, refusing to wash away easily. But that too became a familiar part of winter, the reek of fat mingled with smoke, a perfume of necessity. Practicality shines through as well. Fat burned longer than wood, meaning less fuel needed gathering. In nights when snow buried firewood or storms raged too fiercely to search, a pouch of grease meant survival. The torch was both a lamp and a promise that darkness could be pushed back, even if only a few paces. Imagine the moment of extinguishing. You press the torch into snow, the flame hisses, smoke billows upward in one last oily breath. The night swallows you, but the memory of its glow clings to your eyes. Inside the lodge, torches are set aside, their work done, shadows fading as only embers remain. Sleep beckons again, heavier now, but not without meaning, because even in slumber, minds turn toward what tomorrow brings. For tomorrow, the torches will not only light tasks but also illuminate gatherings, councils held deep into the night, where decisions are debated, alliances forged, and stories exchanged. And so you drift, the smell of grease still in your nose, toward the circle of elders where winter councils unfold beneath wavering flame. The hiss of bare fat torches fades, yet their glow remains in your mind, a flickering circle of light that draws people inward. You blink, and now you see them, figures gathering close, blankets draped over shoulders, faces lit orange by flame. The fire burns steady at the center, stones glowing faintly, pine bedding pushed aside to make room. A winter council is about to begin. It isn't ceremony in the grand sense, nor idle talk to pass the time. It is survival spoken aloud, decisions carried on smoke, wisdom shared across generations. It's firmly established in historical accounts that tribal councils often met during the long winter nights. With travel slowed and hunts less frequent, there was time to plan, to resolve disputes, to discuss alliances, to tell stories that carried lore and memory together. These meetings were not distractions. They were the backbone of community life, keeping order steady while the world outside froze. One curious account, noted by an early French trader, describes how elders sometimes used sticks or bones as tokens, placing them on the ground to mark turns in conversation. Whoever held the token had the floor. To an outsider it might have seemed a game, but within the lodge it was order woven into debate, a way to give every voice its moment. Picture an old man raising a carved stick, his hand trembling but his voice firm, while younger listeners leaned close to catch every word. Interpretations differ about whether all tribal members were free to speak, or if councils were strictly limited to chiefs and elders. Some sources suggest open gatherings where any adult might contribute, while others describe more hierarchical structures. The disagreement persists, leaving us to imagine both possibilities: a circle of many voices or a smaller knot of the most experienced. You sit down now among them. The fire warms your knees, the smoke tickles your nose, and you listen. The cadence of voices is unhurried. Each speaker pauses often, letting silence settle before the next words flow. In a winter council, no one hurries. Every word must carry weight, just as every log on the fire must be chosen carefully. The sensory landscape is rich. Flames pop, wood shifts, and the hides overhead ripple faintly with drafts. The smell of smoke mixes with pine resin, animal musk, and the lingering tang of grease from torches. Shadows flicker across faces, sometimes hiding eyes, sometimes revealing them bright and intense. You hear coughs, murmurs, sighs, and then firm declarations that cut through the haze like arrows. Imagine the topics debated. Should a hunting party risk traveling farther south, even with wolves prowling? Should food from hidden caches be shared now, or saved for a harsher stretch ahead? Should alliances with neighboring clans be reaffirmed or challenged? Each decision matters, for a wrong choice could mean hunger or conflict in the months to come. One odd little detail comes from oral memory. Some councils were said to last until daylight, participants refusing to rest until a decision was reached. Children might doze on pine bedding nearby, dogs curl close, but elders held firm, voices rising and falling until consensus was found. Imagine the heavy weight of fatigue, yet also the satisfaction of emerging from the lodge at dawn with answers carried like fire in the chest. The tactile sensations of such nights are easy to picture. The warmth of hides drawn tighter around shoulders as hours drag on. The rough grain of wood beneath fingers as someone leans against a lodgepole. The sting of smoke in eyes that refuse to close. Each sensation reminds you that survival was not only physical but communal, everyone enduring discomfort together to reach understanding. Scholars continue to discuss whether these winter councils doubled as educational gatherings. Some argue they were primarily political and strategic, while others suggest elders deliberately told stories to teach younger listeners during lulls in debate. Perhaps both were true. Strategy one moment, myth the next, each woven seamlessly into the night. You can almost feel the rhythm of it. A heated exchange about dwindling food softens into a tale of ancestors who endured worse. Laughter follows, easing tension. Then another serious voice rises, proposing a plan for tomorrow's hunt. Silence again, broken by the crackle of wood. The night stretches, not wasted but deepened, every moment serving to bind the group closer. The atmosphere grows heavy with smoke and warmth. Your own eyelids droop as voices blur together, the cadence itself more important than the words. It is the music of survival, steady, deliberate, communal. No one leaves until the fire dies low, until the last stone loses its heat, until the last word finds its place in the circle. A peculiar note from one observer suggested that sometimes, after long debate, elders threw handfuls of snow onto the fire, letting the sudden hiss signal closure. Steam rose, filling the lodge briefly with a cloud that marked both an ending and a cleansing. Whether literal or symbolic, you can almost see the moment. The circle dissolving into laughter and relief as smoke mingled with steam, carrying the night's weight upward. And still, even after serious matters, there was room for play. Children, awake again at dawn, mimicked elders' voices, holding sticks and pretending to argue, their games a rehearsal for future councils. Dogs barked at the noise, joining in the theatre. Life, no matter how harsh, found ways to rehearse itself endlessly. You lean back, the council fading. The fire's glow dims, the torches sputter, and one by one voices fall silent. Only the soft murmur of sleepers remains, bodies curled together under hides. Yet outside, another sound rises, the laughter of children running into the snow, their games sharp with cold air, their joy transforming survival into something more than endurance. And so, as your mind drifts with them, you step out into the dawn light of winter, where frost turns play into training, and laughter teaches as much as hunger. The murmurs of the winter council dissolve into quiet, replaced by a brighter sound laughter. You blink, and find yourself outside the lodge, where children race across the snow. Their shouts echo through the still air, high-pitched and joyous, little puffs of steam bursting from their mouths like tiny smoke signals. The ground crunches beneath their moccasins as they tumble, roll, and chase one another in a game that looks simple, but in truth teaches lessons that will carry them through winters yet to come. It's well attested in historical accounts that native children were not shielded from the cold but introduced to it, gently and playfully. Games in snow were more than entertainment, they were practice. Running in icy air-built lungs and legs, throwing snow-hardened arms, and contests of balance trained the body to endure slips and falls. What might look like frolic to an outsider was, in fact, an apprenticeship in survival. One curious custom mentioned in early explorer journals describes how children shaped chunks of ice into mock tools or even miniature sleds, dragging them in imitation of adults. To modern eyes it might seem quaint, but to them, It was rehearsal. By the time they grew tall enough for real sleds and snowshoes, their muscles and minds already knew the motions. No scholarly consensus exists on whether these winter games were formal training or simply natural play. Some argue parents encouraged them deliberately, guiding activities toward useful skills. Others suggest the play emerged spontaneously, with children mimicking what they observed. Either way, the effect was the same: laughter and survival woven together in snow. Now you step closer into their world. The air is sharp, biting your nose and ears, but their cheeks are flushed with heat. They chase each other, hurling loose snow that bursts into sparkling powder mid-air. One child dives, landing on his stomach to slide down a small drift, squealing with glee. Another balances precariously on a log half buried in frost, arms wide, practicing agility without realizing it. The soundscape is lively. Shouts and giggles cut through the silence of the forest. Snow squeaks, crunches, and sometimes collapses in soft, muffled thuds. Dogs bark at the commotion, tails wagging as they dart in and out of the games, equally joyful. The rhythm of play is unpredictable. Bursts of noise followed by quiet focus as children build forts or roll snowballs, then sudden eruptions of laughter again. The smell of pine drifts on the wind, mingling with the musk of dogs and the faint aroma of smoke from the lodge. Cold air itself has a scent clean, metallic, sharp, and it fills your lungs, invigorating. Even as a bystander in imagination, you feel a kind of energy stealing into your chest, as if the children's laughter carries warmth with it. Touch is vivid here too. Your hands scoop snow, and it squeaks as you squeeze it into a ball. It numbs your fingers almost instantly, the cold biting, yet it thrills you. You toss the snowball lightly and watch it shatter against the ground in a spray of glitter. Imagine children doing the same, toughening their skin to the cold, learning just how long fingers can last before they must retreat to warmth. An unusual practice described in oral histories is how children sometimes dared each other to hold snow in their bare hands, the winner being whoever lasted longest before flinching. Outsiders may have seen cruelty in such contests, but within the community it was a playful test of endurance, teaching youngsters to know the limits of their own bodies. You can almost hear the giggles mixed with winces as little hands shook, numb but proud. Researchers also discuss whether winter storytelling games blended with physical play. Some suggest children reenacted myths with snow figures or acted as animals from sacred tales, learning lore as they laughed. Others doubt this, insisting play was more spontaneous. Yet when you watch them pretend to be wolves, crouching low before leaping into snowbanks, the idea feels natural. Stories live not only in voices, but in actions. You see a group now building a fort, piling snow into walls, carving out doorways. Their mittened hands move quickly, cheeks red with cold. Soon they crouch inside, giggling, hiding from friends who rush to attack with snowballs. The fort creaks under weight but holds, and their cheers rise in triumph. Beneath the fun lies a lesson: how to shape snow into structure, how to find shelter where none exists. The tactile memory grows stronger. You kneel beside them, patting snow into a wall. It is firm, icy at the surface but crumbly inside. Your gloves dampen quickly, fingers numbing, yet you keep shaping, pressing, molding. The wall rises, crude but steady. For a moment, you too are a child again, learning resilience in play. An odd anecdote from one trader tells of children sliding on frozen riverbanks using rib bones as skates. They strapped them to feet with rawhide and pushed themselves along, laughing at every fall. It sounds fanciful, yet possible, and whether truth or embellishment, it captures the inventive spirit of play, where even bones became toys. Scholars may continue to debate the purpose of such games, but you, watching now, see their truth. They were practice wrapped in joy, teaching cold to be less enemy and more companion. By laughing in snow, children learned not to fear it. By tumbling in frost, they grew strong enough to face harsher trials later. The day wanes, shadows stretching long across the field. Children slow, breath ragged, cheeks raw. They stumble back toward the lodge, snow clinging to hair and hides, dogs trotting proudly beside them. Laughter fades into yawns, energy into hunger. Yet the glow of play lingers, a warmth deeper than fire. Inside, parents greet them with smiles and gentle scolds. Snow shakes off boots, wet mittens are hung to dry, and children curl quickly under hides, their bodies still radiating the heat of movement. Their dreams will be filled with forts and sliding, but their muscles remember something more: how to endure cold, how to move through winter's grasp with agility and laughter. The lodge settles again, fire glowing, chants murmured low. Outside the forest grows dark, and the cold presses heavier, yet spirits inside are buoyed by play. Tomorrow, children will grow a little older, games a little harder, lessons a little deeper. And in the hush that follows, elders begin to speak softly again, not counsels now, but stories, sacred winter tales, myths carried across generations, whispered into the dark to teach and to comfort. The laughter of children fades into the cadence of myth, and your mind drifts with it, ready to walk into the world where spirits roam and stories hold the cold at bay. The echoes of children's laughter fade into silence, and in that silence another sound begins, voices low and measured, words flowing like a river under ice. You look around the lodge, and the faces you see are lit not by the flicker of play, but by the glow of reverence. Elders sit upright, their eyes reflecting firelight, their hands gesturing gently as they begin to weave stories. These are not idle tales. They are the sacred winter stories, spoken only when snow lies heavy, when nights are long enough to hold their weight. It's well documented in ethnographic records that certain myths were reserved exclusively for winter. The belief was simple yet profound. Telling them in summer invited danger, even summoned spirits that did not belong in the warmth. But when frost covered the earth, when the world itself seemed asleep, it was safe to speak them aloud. Stories became both shield and gift, carrying meaning deeper than food or fire. One curious note from explorers describes how listeners sometimes covered their heads with blankets while these stories were told, not from fear of cold, but from awe. The act created intimacy, muffling outside noise, turning the tale into a private world. You imagine lying beneath a heavy hide, hearing only the elder's voice, words vibrating through the fabric into your bones. Academic circles continue to debate whether these restrictions, winter-only storytelling, were universal across all tribes or specific to certain nations. Some argue it was widespread, rooted in shared beliefs about cycles of nature. Others insist it was more localized, with many communities telling myths year-round. Whatever the scholarly disagreements, the imagery of winter as a sacred stage endures. You lean in now, and the story unfolds. The elder's voice is gravelly yet strong. He speaks of spirits who roam the snow, testing human endurance. Some are kind, guiding lost hunters back to camp. Others are cruel, leading wanderers into blizzards where no path returns. The fire pops in rhythm, punctuating the tale like drums hidden inside the hearth. The soundscape deepens. The lodge is silent except for the storyteller's voice, the occasional crackle, the faint sigh of wind against hides. Even dogs seem subdued, heads on paws, ears twitching but bodies still. Children stare wide-eyed, their play energy spent, their minds captured by images too large for daylight. Smells mingle with words. Smoke thickens as wood shifts. Pine resin drips into flames, releasing sharp perfume. The elder's voice seems to ride on that smoke, curling upward toward the smoke flaps, drifting out into the starry night. You breathe it in, and the story feels not just heard but inhaled, absorbed into your chest with every breath. Touch is part of the experience too. You feel the weight of hides over your lap, warm and heavy. Your fingers trace grooves in the stone beside you, grounding you while the tale carries your mind far beyond the lodge. The heat of bodies near you reassures. but the story makes you shiver anyway, not from cold, but from the image of spirits prowling just outside, invisible, waiting. One unusual little detail recounted in oral memory is that some elders deliberately lowered their voices at key moments, forcing listeners to lean closer. The hush created tension, the kind that makes your heart beat faster, though you know you're safe. A sudden shout after such quiet made children jump, sometimes laugh nervously, sometimes cry. Either reaction meant the story had worked, it had entered their bones. You let yourself drift into one of these myths. In it, the moon is not just light, but a being, a pale hunter who watches over sleepers. His bow is made of ice, his arrows of starlight, and when he aims them, they pierce dreams. Some dreams heal, others warn, a few frighten. To speak of him in summer would invite his gaze too directly, but in winter, when he is strongest, it is respectful to honor him with tales. Scholars still debate whether such personifications were allegories or literal beliefs. Some claim they were symbolic, teaching lessons through imagery. Others argue that people truly felt the presence of these beings, no less real than wind or frost. You realize that for those listening by firelight, the distinction hardly mattered. Real or symbolic, the stories taught how to endure. The elder pauses now, sipping from a wooden bowl, steam rising faintly. Silence settles, heavy but expectant. Then he continues, telling of animals who once spoke, of wolves who taught humans to hunt, of bears who gave warmth in dreams. The stories blur boundary lines. Animal, human, spirit, all connected, all moving through winter as one. You feel the weight of those tales in your body. They do not entertain alone, they instruct. Do not wander at night. Respect the animals you hunt. Trust the wisdom of elders. Share warmth, share food, share story. Each lesson folds into myth, disguised as adventure, but meant as lore. One peculiar observation from travelers noted that sometimes, at the end of such tales, elders laughed softly, as if amused by the fear they had conjured. Children clung tighter to hides, eyes wide, while elders winked knowingly. Fear, after all, was not cruelty, it was training. Better to tremble at a story's spirit than at a blizzard's indifference. The fire burns lower, shadows grow longer. The elder's voice softens, words slowing, until the tale ends with a sigh. Silence follows, broken only by the shift of pine boughs as children curl deeper, hiding under blankets, hearts still racing. Dogs yawn, ears flicking once before settling again. Adults nod, satisfied that lessons have been planted like seeds in the night. You exhale slowly, realizing your own chest has tightened, your heart quickened. The story lives in you now, not just in memory but in sensation. You glance toward the flap, half expecting a spirit to stand outside, framed in snow. But there is nothing, only wind, only frost, and yet you feel watched, protected, tested. The lodge quiets fully. Breaths lengthen, fire sinks, the night deepens. And just before you drift into sleep again, another memory stirs. The feel of objects tucked safely in bundles, charms believed to guard against the very spirits you've just heard described. Amulets pressed close to skin, medicine bundles whispered over, tokens clutched in small hands as insurance against frost and fear. You lean toward that thought, letting stories of spirits flow into the memory of charms, ready to learn how belief itself warmed bodies through nights colder than imagination. The last syllables of the winter tale still echo in your ears, and you feel the chill of imagined spirits lingering outside the lodge. Yet your gaze shifts downward, to where small bundles lie tucked carefully near sleeping bodies. Wrapped in hides or woven cloth, tied with sinew cords, these are medicine bundles, objects not of luxury but of necessity, guardians as vital as fire or hide. You reach toward one in imagination, fingers brushing the smooth edge of bone, the rough texture of feather, the cold weight of stone. Each item hums with meaning, silent but present, a shield against the invisible. It is reliably documented that medicine bundles were treasured across many native nations, each unique to the person or family that carried it. Inside might be stones shaped oddly by nature, bits of fur, claws, feathers, dried plants, or carved tokens. The contents were less important individually than collectively, for together they held power stories, prayers, and memory compressed into something tangible. To sleep near them was to believe the cold had less chance of creeping in. One curious note in early ethnographic writings mentions how even mundane items could acquire meaning once placed inside. A pebble from a river, a scrap of hide from a successful hunt, a feather found on a trail when bundled, they transformed into protection. Outsiders sometimes scoffed, calling it superstition, but to those who lived with winter's bite, such objects anchored hope. Imagine lying under hides, clutching a small bundle, the smooth stone inside pressing into your palm as if the river itself guarded your dreams. Interpretations differ among scholars about whether these bundles were personal or communal. Some sources emphasize individual medicine, carried by warriors, hunters, or shamans. Others describe family bundles, laid at the center of a lodge to guard everyone within. Both forms likely coexisted, their power scaling with need. One bundle for one body, or one bundle for many hearts. You lean closer in imagination. The bundle smells faintly of smoke, resin, and dried herbs. When touched, it leaves your fingers dusty, as if the plants inside still carry their essence. It feels warm, even when cold, perhaps only because of belief, but that belief is enough. Children press small amulets against their cheeks. Mothers tuck them beneath bedding. Elders keep them close to the chest. Everybody at rest is linked by unseen threads to these small guardians. The soundscape of a night with medicine bundles is different, though subtle. The chants of earlier hours have faded, but whispers continue. Quiet prayers murmured over bundles, words repeated softly until voices trail into sleep. The rustle of sinew cords being adjusted, the faint rattle of small bones inside, the hush of cloth shifting, all these join the rhythm of fire and breath. To your ear, it is music barely audible, yet it gives the lodge a sense of being sealed against more than wind. Touch the bundle again in your mind. The cord is tight, worn smooth from many hands. The hide feels oily, supple despite the cold, evidence of careful tending. Within, the objects shift slightly, knocking together with muted clicks. Those sounds are not random, they are reassurance, like a heartbeat in a pouch. You curl your hand around it, and the world outside seems less threatening. One unusual account tells of charms specifically made to ward off frostbite, tiny carvings of fingers and toes, carried as talismans. The belief was that by honoring the body's most vulnerable parts, the cold would hesitate to claim them. Whether symbolic or effective, the act itself shows the ingenuity of survival. Fight frost not only with hides and fires, but with imagination and faith. Ethnographers remain divided on the role of shamans in relation to these bundles. Some argue they were the sole keepers of powerful charms, distributing them sparingly. Others describe bundles as commonplace, accessible to any family. The distinction is murky, perhaps because outsiders expected hierarchy where daily life required practicality. The reality likely lay in between, sacred bundles kept by leaders, smaller ones crafted by all. Picture now an elder kneeling by the hearth, untying a larger bundle. Inside are feathers singed at tips, stones painted with ochre, herbs dried and brittle. He holds each up to the fire briefly, muttering words you cannot quite catch, before tucking them back inside. The entire lodge watches silently, breaths held, until the bundle is tied again and set at the lodge's heart. Only then do people relax, as if an unseen door has been bolted against the night. The sensory layering is powerful. Smoke curls around the bundle, carrying scent of sage or cedar, pungent and earthy. The flicker of flame dances on polished stone, gleaming faintly. Fingers brush across fur, soft against rough hands. Each sense confirms the presence of something more than objects, something binding, protective, reassuring. An odd little detail preserved in oral histories is that sometimes, when a child feared the cold, a small charm was given to them specifically for sleep. It might be nothing more than a feather tied with sinew, but the child believed it held power. Often, such charms were named little warmth, spirit paw, sun feather. By naming the object, families gave shape to hope, and hope made the night gentler. Scholars debate whether the bundle's power was psychological or spiritual. Modern analysis often frames them as tools of comfort, reducing anxiety, and thus easing sleep. Traditional accounts insist their power was real, gifted by spirits through ritual. You, lying here in imagination, realize both explanations hold truth. Comfort itself is power, especially against cold that seeks cracks in mind as much as in skin. The lodge grows quiet now. Bundles rest near bodies, their faint rattles stilled. Dogs sigh deeply, tails twitching once before settling. The fire dims, stones glow faintly, smoke rises in lazy streams through flaps above. You curl tighter beneath hides, one hand still clutching the imagined charm. Sleep comes more easily with it near, as though frost itself hesitates at the threshold. And when you drift into dreams, the image shifts. You no longer lie beneath hides, but crawl into the earth itself, low mounds of snow packed into shelters, burrows shaped like those of foxes or hares. The world contracts, ceilings pressing close, yet within them warmth blossoms. Snow, once feared, becomes home again, and you slide forward into that white den, ready to rest deeper still. The faint rattle of charms fades into stillness, and now the walls of the lodge seem to dissolve. You find yourself crawling forward, the ground rising around you, the ceiling lowering until you're pressed into a narrow tunnel. Snow packs overhead, dense and muffled, yet strangely welcoming. You shuffle on your knees, fur brushing against icy walls that glitter faintly in the light of a fading torch. And then, at the end of this passage, the tunnel opens into a chamber, a snow house, round and domed, a world within white silence. It is well established through Arctic records that snow itself became shelter, crafted into igloos or snow mounds by Inuit and other northern peoples. To outsiders, the idea seems contradictory. How could cold itself provide warmth? Yet the truth is simple. Compacted snow, filled with air pockets, acts as insulation. Temperatures inside such shelters could rise astonishingly high compared to the brutal cold outside, enough for people to sit in relative comfort while storms raged beyond. One curious observation from explorers was that these snow houses often smelled not icy, but earthy. Once bodies and lamps filled the chamber, the interior warmed enough to release scents of fur, hides, and even faint musk from moss bedding. Imagine stepping inside after hours in wind, your nose greeted not by frost but by the damp, musky comfort of shelter. Researchers continue to debate whether the design of these shelters was uniform or varied widely. Some argue igloos were precisely engineered with spiraling blocks, each one cut and shaped like puzzle pieces. Others suggest many were simple mounds hollowed out by hand, less elegant but equally effective. The disagreement persists, but all evidence agrees. Snow became more than obstacle. It became architecture. You crawl deeper into the chamber. The walls gleam faintly, light shimmering through thin sections like frosted glass. The ceiling curves above you, seamless and smooth, a dome sculpted by necessity. Inside, the air feels still, muffled, almost heavy. Outside, wind howls like wolves. Inside, silence reigns. Your ears adjust, and suddenly you hear smaller things. The shuffle of fur against snow, the sigh of a sleeping body, the drip of melting ice from the ceiling. The sensation of touch is sharp here. Your palm presses against the wall, cold, firm, yet not biting. The surface is damp where warmth has begun to seep in. You sit back on pine boughs spread across the floor, their needles prickling through hides, releasing faint resin scent. Beneath you, snow compresses but does not melt, holding firm under weight. The sounds of life inside a snow shelter are unique. Fire is rarely used, too risky in such close quarters, so instead, stone lamps fueled with seal or whale fat glow softly, their flames tiny but steady. They hiss faintly, sputtering at times, the grease crackling like miniature fires. The air smells rich, heavy with animal fat, sometimes unpleasant but always comforting in its promise of warmth. One unusual anecdote tells of children licking the walls of these snow houses out of curiosity, their tongues sticking painfully to the icy surface. Parents scolded them, but laughter often followed, for even in harshest conditions, play found its way inside. You smile at the thought, tiny tongues stuck to domes of survival, a memory surely repeated across countless winters. Scholars have long debated whether these snow shelters were used mainly for travel or if families lived in them for extended stretches. Some evidence suggests they were temporary, built along hunting routes, while others claim they sometimes served as longer-term dwellings during migration. The truth likely varied, but both scenarios speak to adaptability, the ability to make home wherever snow could be shaped. You glance upward now. The ceiling glows faintly where moonlight filters through blocks. The effect is magical. The dome seems to breathe, its surface shifting with each gust of wind outside. Shadows ripple, making you feel as if the snow itself is alive, protective, enfolding you in its body. The tactile intimacy of such shelter cannot be overstated. Hides line the walls, fur piled thick on floors, bodies pressed together in close quarters. Each touch shoulder against shoulder, dog against foot, child against mother, multiplies warmth. The snow insulates not just physically but emotionally, trapping laughter, whispers, and sighs as securely as it traps heat. One peculiar custom recorded is that some families decorated the interiors with soot drawings, simple figures, animals, or symbols marked on icy walls with smoke-blackened fingers. These drawings melted away in time, but for a season they made the white chamber into something more personal, a gallery of survival etched on frozen walls. Imagine lying back, eyelids heavy, eyes drifting over charcoal lines of a caribou drawn above your head, the figure watching over your dreams. Researchers argue about how much symbolism was attached to snow shelters. Were they seen purely as practical, or did their dome shape echo larger cosmologies, miniature worlds within worlds, reflections of sky or womb? Some scholars claim such connections are obvious, while others caution against reading too much. You, sitting inside the glowing dome, feel the argument fade. Symbol or not, the shelter already feels sacred, simply by existing. The night inside stretches differently. Without wind, without cold stabbing at your skin, time seems suspended. You curl into hides, the fat lamp flickering, and silence wraps around you like another blanket. Even your own breath sounds louder here, condensed, intimate. Sleep arrives easily, carried by the hum of stillness, broken only by the occasional drip of meltwater or sigh of a dog. And when you dream, the walls themselves seem to dream with you. Shadows ripple across icy surfaces, shapes morph into faces, animals, spirits. Perhaps it is imagination, perhaps it is the flicker of flame, but in such closeness the boundary blurs. You are not separate from the snow, you are inside it, part of it, sharing its endurance. An odd observation from Arctic travelers recounts how, in mornings, the first act was to cut small vents in the roof to let in fresh air. Without them, breath alone thickened the chamber, fogging and icing the walls. Imagine the hiss of a knife slicing through snow above, a shaft of cold sunlight pouring in, blinding at first but exhilarating. The world outside returns, harsh yet beautiful, waiting for you to step forth. You stretch in your snow chamber now, pine needles crackling beneath, hides rustling softly. The cold does not bite. Instead, it holds you gently, as though the snow itself has agreed to keep you alive a little longer. And yet, you know survival is not only about shelter or sleep, it is about movement, returning to paths, enduring storms that threaten to erase every track. Outside, snowshoes wait, trails beckon, winds sharpen. You rise slowly, brush frost from your shoulders, and crawl back through the tunnel into the open air. The world is white again, boundless, indifferent. But you are not unprepared. For now, the memory of this snow house clings to you, a dome of silence and safety, proof that even winter itself can be reshaped into friend. And as you step forward into the wind, your thoughts turn to the greatest challenge of all: storms that sweep suddenly, mercilessly, swallowing paths, shelters, and even hope. The story shifts with you, from calm domes to blizzards fierce enough to test every trick survival has taught. The memory of the snow house lingers, warm and muffled, but outside the air greets you with a very different voice. The wind rises, first a whisper, then a shriek. Snow that once lay soft and still now lifts into the air, spinning, stinging, blinding. A blizzard has come, sudden and merciless, sweeping across the plains like a great beast. You squint against its force, eyes watering, lashes crusting with ice. Every step a battle. It is well attested in winter accounts that blizzards struck with little warning, overwhelming even the most prepared. Visibility dropped to nothing, sound warped into howls, and temperature plummeted. For people who lived outdoors, survival meant not just endurance but strategy, knowing where to shelter, how to move, when to stop. To underestimate the storm was to vanish into it. One curious recollection from oral stories describes how children were told that blizzards were the breath of giant owls. Their wings stirred snow, their cries echoed in the wind. Whether literal or symbolic, the tale kept children cautious, teaching them to respect storms as living forces. Imagine a child clutching a parent's hand, listening to wind shriek and whisper, "The owl is hunting. Stay close, stay still." Scholars continue to debate whether communities faced blizzards primarily by hunkering down or whether movement through storms was sometimes necessary. Some argue most people waited it out in lodges or snow shelters. Others insist hunters often pressed forward, guided by instinct and experience, trusting dogs and memory of trails. Both possibilities likely played out, depending on need. You feel it now in imagination. The wind slams against your chest, each gust like a shove from an invisible hand. Snow stings your cheeks, fine as sand, sharp as needles. It hisses through cracks in clothing, finding bare skin no matter how carefully wrapped. Your hands ache even in mittens, fingers clenching and unclenching to keep blood moving. The sound is deafening. Wind screams, snow whips, trees groan, branches snap. Your ears fill with a roar so constant it seems eternal, a drumbeat of chaos. You shout, but your own voice vanishes instantly, devoured by the gale. Even dogs bark unheard, their mouths moving in silence, eyes glowing faint through the storm. Smell is almost absent, stripped away by the storm's fury. Only faint traces linger, the tang of wood smoke from a distant lodge, carried oddly far before dissipating. The air tastes instead of metal and ice, sharp enough to make your tongue ache. You lick your lips and they crack instantly, blood freezing before it drips. Touch becomes your anchor. You reach for the rope tied around your waist, connected to others ahead. Each tug is reassurance, each pull a reminder you are not alone. The cord stiffens with frost, scraping your gloves, yet it holds, keeping the group together when sight is lost. Imagine the relief of feeling that line, invisible in snow but unbreakable in trust. One unusual practice recounted in Explorer's Notes describes how some families built windbreaks of snow in minutes, crouching behind them until the worst passed. They used snowshoes to shovel, dogs to press drifts, hides to cover the tops. Crude, temporary, but life-saving. You see it now, figures huddled in a shallow hollow, snow piled high around, the storm screaming overhead, but softened by the wall. Ethnographers debate whether people ever deliberately slept during blizzards, conserving energy, or if constant movement was required to stave off frost. Some argue stillness risked freezing, others say exhaustion demanded rest. The truth again lies in balance. Sometimes movement, sometimes hibernation, depending on resources and will. You press on in imagination. Snow blinds your eyes, but your feet find rhythm. Step, sink, pull, step. Each motion is agony, yet momentum keeps you warm. The dogs lead, ears flat, bodies low, noses finding direction even when sight fails. Their fur whitens with frost, their tails stiff, yet they move, pulling sled and humans alike through a storm that feels endless. The tactile sensations grow sharper. Ice clings to your lashes, pulling them shut. Your hair stiffens, strands frozen into needles. Every breath burns your throat, lungs aching with cold, so fierce it feels like swallowing knives. Yet inside your body, a furnace glows, heat born of effort and stubbornness. One odd anecdote passed down describes how people sometimes turn their backs to the wind, walking backward to shield faces from frost. It must have looked strange lines of figures inching backward across drifts, but it worked, saving eyes and skin from burning blasts. You try it now, in your mind, and feel the wind slam your back instead of your face. It helps, just enough. Scholars still argue whether storms were interpreted primarily as natural events or as spiritual trials. Some accounts frame them as weather, harsh but ordinary. Others insist they were seen as messages from spirits, tests of endurance, lessons to be remembered. For those caught in their grip, perhaps both explanations held truth, scientific or spiritual. The storm was larger than human scale. The storm rages on, but you find moments of stillness inside it. A lull in the wind, a pause in the roar, enough to hear your own breath again. You huddle with companions, share body heat, whisper encouragement. Words vanish quickly, but the act of speaking warms you, lifts spirits, creates a bubble of humanity inside the blizzard. Hours pass, or perhaps only minutes. Time dissolves in the storm. Eventually the wind lessens, the roar softens, the snow falls gently instead of sideways. You emerge from shelter, blinking at a world transformed. Drifts rise like new hills, trails erased, landmarks hidden. Silence follows, vast and heavy, broken only by the distant creak of trees releasing their burden of snow. The aftermath has its own feel. Air is clean, shockingly clear, as if the storm scrubbed the world raw. Snow sparkles, untouched, blinding in sudden Sunday. Your boots sink into fresh powder, soft now instead of stinging. The rope slackens. The dogs shake themselves free, snow flying in clouds. Relief washes through you like warmth, though the cold remains. One peculiar custom described in oral traditions is how, after a storm, people threw handfuls of snow into the air as a gesture of thanks. The act acknowledged survival, showing respect to the forces that could so easily have ended them. Children laughed as they tossed powder skyward. Adults smiled faintly, and the moment transformed danger into gratitude. You walk back toward camp in thought, body aching, face raw, but heart steady. The blizzard has tested you, stripped you to bone and will, yet still you breathe, still you move. And as the lodge comes into sight, smoke rising once more from its flaps, you realize winter is not only about enduring storms, it is also about greeting the clear sky that follows. Inside, hides wait, fire glows, stories continue. Outside, the world is bright, silent, vast. And just as you begin to settle again, your eyes catch another kind of motion. Dancers circling fire, their steps steady, their chants rising, their breath glowing in cold air. Survival now merges with ritual, endurance with celebration, as bodies move against the endless snow. The storm has passed, leaving the world hushed and bright. Snow glitters under the pale sun, as if the land has been freshly made. In this moment of stillness, you hear something new, not the howl of wind, not the groan of ice, but a drum beat, low, steady, deliberate. It rises from the center of camp, where figures gather around a fire newly kindled. The flames leap eagerly, casting shadows that dance with the people who circle them. A ritual dance has begun, bodies moving in harmony, breath steaming, feet stamping in rhythm. It is well attested in winter records that ceremonies often followed survival of great hardship storms, hunts, or midwinter milestones. Dance was not mere celebration, it was communion, a way to bind community tighter, to honor spirits, to remind everyone that survival was not luck alone. Movements carried meaning, steps for endurance, turns for the cycles of nature, raised arms for thanks. To join the circle was to place yourself within the story of survival itself. One curious observation from early missionaries, bewildered by what they saw, was that dancers sometimes wore snow still clinging to their clothes. Rather than brushing it away, they let frost glimmer under firelight, as though winter itself had been invited into the circle. Imagine the sight: hides shimmering with ice crystals, feet pounding frost into powder, sparks rising with breath. Scholars remain divided on whether these dances were tied strictly to spiritual rites, or whether they also served practical roles warming bodies after cold trials, rehearsing endurance, reinforcing unity. Some insist they were sacred above all, others argue they blurred into the daily, both prayer and exercise. Either way, the circle of dancers stood as proof that survival could be made into rhythm, hardship into beauty. You step closer in imagination. The fire warms your face, but cold bites your back. Drums echo deep in your chest, each beat like a second heartbeat. Voices rise in chant, sharp and guttural, carrying through crisp night air. The sound weaves with the fire's crackle, the hiss of sparks, the thud of feet. Together they create a song larger than any single voice, a song born from earth and sky alike. The sensory details engulf you. Smoke curls into your nose, heavy with pine and resin. Your tongue tastes ash carried by wind, bitter but grounding. The snow beneath your feet crunches with every step, hard packed by the dancers before you. You feel vibration through your soles, rhythm rising from ground into body. Every sense insists you are part of the circle, even if only in imagination. One unusual custom recorded is that during some dances, participants carried small torches of resinous wood or fat-soaked reeds. They waved them in arcs, leaving glowing trails through the dark, patterns of fire against black sky. Outsiders thought it chaotic, but to those inside the circle, the movements traced invisible stories, spirals of seasons, paths of stars, shapes of animals. You can almost see the trails now, fire painting the air in fleeting designs. The tactile sensation of movement is sharp. Your arms lift, heavy with hides, yet you feel lighter as the rhythm pulls you. Your breath grows quick, lungs burning with cold air, yet every exhale turns into steam that joins the chant. Your legs ache, but the ache becomes pleasure, proof of life after storm. Researchers continue to puzzle over whether these midwinter dances were competitive or cooperative. Some sources mention contests who could dance longest, who could stamp hardest. Others emphasize unity, the circle as one body moving in unison. Likely both forms existed, sometimes challenge, sometimes harmony, always endurance. Now you see the faces of dancers around you, some grim with concentration, others smiling despite the cold. Children join, mimicking steps clumsily, giggling, falling, rising again. Elders sway gently at the edges, voices steady though bodies no longer strong. Dogs bark, tails wagging, pacing outside the circle as though caught in the rhythm themselves. The sounds intensify. Drums thunder faster, chants climb higher, feet stamp in unison, snow spraying upward, shimmering in firelight. The dance becomes storm-like, yet not destructive, creative, powerful. binding. For a moment you forget the cold entirely. Heat pours from your body, sweat trickling despite the frost. The fires glow and the dancers' movement merge until the whole scene feels like a living flame. One peculiar detail from oral memory tells of breath freezing mid-dance. In deepest cold, steam condensed so quickly that it formed frost on hides and hair. Dancers emerged, coated in white, as though transformed into spirits themselves. Imagine seeing faces rimed with frost, eyes glittering, voices still chanting, bodies glowing from within despite being cloaked in ice. Scholars debate whether such rituals had fixed forms or whether they shifted each year. Some claim strict patterns of movement passed down precisely. Others argue improvisation ruled, steps changing with mood and need. Perhaps both were true, a framework anchored in tradition, but details shaped by the night's spirit. The dance slows now. Drums ease, voices soften, feet stamp more gently. The circle tightens, bodies swaying in harmony. Chants become hums, hums become sighs, sighs fade into silence. The fire pops, a final spark leaping upward. Breath clouds the air, then drifts away. For a moment, the night feels utterly still, as though even the stars have paused to watch. The tactile calm is immediate. Your heartbeat slows, sweat chills on your skin, breath steadies. The ache in your legs lingers, but now it feels like a badge, a memory etched into muscle. You draw your hide closer, warmth returning as stillness replaces motion. One odd gesture concludes the ritual. Hands lifted to the sky, palms open, fingers spread. Whether to release thanks, to call for blessing, or simply to stretch, no one can say with certainty. But the effect is powerful, all those hands raised together, firelight flickering between them, snow glowing around them. The dance has ended, but its warmth remains. People drift back to lodges, hides brushing snow, laughter and murmurs soft. The fire burns lower, but smoke carries the memory of rhythm into the night sky. Dogs curl again by flaps. Children stumble sleepily into bedding. Elders nod in satisfaction. You step back, watching the circle dissolve, yet still feeling its rhythm in your chest. The storm is forgotten, the blizzard survived, replaced by the memory of bodies moving as one. The lesson is clear. Survival is not only resistance but celebration, not only endurance but expression. And as you lie once more beneath hides, heart still echoing with drumbeats, you imagine another rhythm waiting. Not human voices, not human steps, but the silent pace of stars above, the turning of heavens, the winter sky itself moving like a great dance across the black. The echoes of drums linger faintly in your chest, and when silence settles again, you notice a different rhythm overhead. You step outside the lodge in imagination, pulling hides tight around your shoulders, and tilt your head back. The night is clear, the storm long gone, and above you spreads a canopy of stars so sharp, so innumerable, that it feels as though the sky has cracked open to reveal endless fire. The air bites at your cheeks, yet the sight fills you with warmth. You are looking at the winter sky, the great ceiling under which every lodge, every snow house, every council has existed. It's well established that stars were more than decoration to native peoples across the Americas. They served as guides for navigation, as calendars marking seasons, as stories linking past and present. Constellations rose and fell with the year, reminding hunters when animals would migrate, telling farmers when ground would thaw. To gaze upward was not idle. Wonder it was, reading, learning, remembering. One curious detail recounted in northern oral traditions is that people sometimes listened as much as looked. On still nights with no wind, they claimed the stars themselves gave off faint sounds, like whispers or humming. Modern science shrugs at this, but the memory persists. Imagine standing on snow, breath clouding, straining your ears, and believing you hear the stars speaking softly in a language older than Earth. Scholars remain divided on whether star myths primarily arose from practical use or spiritual imagination. Some argue constellations were named first to serve as guides, later dressed in story. Others insist the stories came first, with utility added afterward. Whatever the order, the result was the same. Stars became both map and myth, science and poetry in one. You look up now, eyes wide, and the cold no longer matters. The stars blaze fiercely, brighter than you have ever seen, unmuted by city lights or haze. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a frozen river, shimmering, endless. Each cluster forms shapes, animals, hunters, spirits. To you they may seem abstract, but to those who relied on them, they were familiar faces, constant companions. The sensory experience deepens. Snow crunches beneath your boots as you shift for a better view. The cold air burns your lungs with every inhale, sharper now in stillness. Your ears are filled with silence so complete that the beat of your own heart feels intrusive. The smell is faint, metallic and clean, the smell of cold itself. Everything seems sharper under the stars, as though the world has been honed to a blade. One unusual story describes how some tribes taught children to find their way home at night by watching how constellations moved. The stars were said to walk across the sky, and if you could remember where they began, you could follow their steps back to safety. Imagine a child trudging through snow, lost and frightened, then calming as they recognized a familiar cluster overhead. Each star becomes a companion leading them toward warmth. The tactile aspect of stargazing is strange but undeniable. You tilt your head back so far that your neck stiffens. Frost forms on your lashes, and your eyes water with cold, yet you cannot look away. The stars pierce through the tears, glittering, multiplying until the sky feels alive. Researchers continue to discuss whether winter constellations held different weight than summer ones. Some argue they were more important, since longer nights meant more time for stories and navigation. Others claim the significance was steady year-round. Regardless, there is no denying that in winter, the sky dominates its canvas larger, its actors brighter, its presence overwhelming. You remember one star in particular, often called the North Star, fixed and unmoving while others circle around. To those in winter, it was anchor, center, reassurance. Storms might erase trails, winds might hide landmarks, but the star remained. Looking at it now, you feel steadiness, a reminder that survival is not chaos but rhythm. A peculiar anecdote from explorer journals tells of people pointing to the northern lights and laughing, saying they were the torches of spirits hunting in the sky. The aurora, flickering green and red, became both wonder and warning. If spirits were hunting, one must tread carefully below. Imagine lying on pine bedding inside a lodge, hearing elders describe those lights above, your dreams filling with glowing hunters striding across heaven. You breathe deeply again, your chest expanding in the still night. The stars are endless, but they do not overwhelm. Instead, they soothe, their distance a comfort. You realize that to those who slept beneath them, the sky was never empty. It was crowded with guidance, filled with reminders that no one was ever truly alone. The tactile chill sharpens, urging you back toward fire. But before you return, you trace one more constellation in your mind. Its shape tells of a hunter who never tires, or an animal that renews itself each year, or a spirit who guards sleepers. The story differs depending on who speaks, but the effect is the same. The sky becomes a blanket of reassurance stretched across the world. You step back into the lodge now, cheeks burning from cold, nose tingling, hands stiff. The fire greets you instantly, warmth seeping through your hides. Children stir as you settle, whispering questions about the sky, eyes still wide from tales. Elders nod knowingly, voices low as they describe constellations again, embedding stars into memory. Sleep comes easier after such gazing. The stars above remind you that winter is not endless. The sky shifts, cycles turn, warmth will return. And as you close your eyes, the shimmer remains behind your lids, as if the stars themselves follow you into dreams. But the dreams do not belong only to individuals. They ripple through families, through whole lodges, weaving into shared visions. For in winter, dreams themselves were survival maps, warnings, inspirations, passed from sleeper to sleeper as precious as fire. And so the story carries you from constellations above to visions within, into the quiet but powerful world of winter dreaming. The stars still glow behind your eyelids as you sink deeper into warmth. The fire crackles faintly. Dogs sigh at your feet. Hides press close around you. Soon, your body slackens and your breath deepens. But in this winter world, sleep is never only rest. It is also passage. You drift into dreaming, and the dream feels as real as the snow beneath your lodge. It's well recorded that among many native peoples, dreams were not considered random illusions. They were messages, gifts, or trials, often taken as seriously as waking events. Winter, with its long nights and heavy silence, was the season of dreams. Elders told of visions that guided hunts, warned of dangers, or revealed paths to healing. To sleep deeply was to listen. One curious anecdote preserved in oral tradition describes hunters who dreamed of specific animals, elk, moose, or caribou, only to encounter those very creatures days later. To them, this was not coincidence, but confirmation. The dream had been a guide. Imagine the thrill of waking from such a vision, telling it to your companions, and seeing their faces shift from skepticism to reverence when the prophecy proved true. Scholars remain divided on whether these dreams were interpreted strictly as spiritual encounters or as subconscious reflections of daily concerns. Some argue dreams were direct communication from spirits, while others insist they were the natural product of hunger, exhaustion, and fear. Yet the debate itself shows the importance of dreams. Whatever their origin, they were seen as meaningful, woven into survival. You feel it now in imagination. The lodge is dark, only faint embers glowing. Around you, people shift in sleep, breaths long and steady. Your own chest rises and falls, your body heavy. Then your mind drifts outward across snow, through forests into skies. You dream you are walking beside a river that groans beneath ice, the stars reflecting in its cracks like glowing eyes. Each step feels both real and unreal, as though you are both inside and outside your own body. The sensory details are vivid. In dream, the cold does not bite but tingles, almost pleasant. The air smells of pine and smoke, though no fire burns. Sounds sharpen branches snapping, wolves howling far away, water creaking under ice. Yet nothing frightens you. Instead, every sensation feels like part of a message waiting to be deciphered. One unusual practice mentioned in winter stories is that upon waking, people often shared their dreams immediately, before moving or speaking of anything else. They believed the first telling carried the dream's power intact. To wait was to let it fade. Families listened intently, weighing every detail for meaning. Picture a child rubbing eyes in morning light, whispering of a bear walking beside them, and elders nodding gravely, interpreting the vision as protection or warning. The tactile sensations of dreaming are striking. You feel fur brushing your arms, though none is there. Snow crunching beneath your feet, though you lie still. Dreams blur boundaries, and in winter, when waking life is already so harsh, that blur feels like release. A body can only endure so much cold and hunger, but a dream can carry it somewhere warmer, safer, freer. Researchers continue to discuss whether fasting heightened these visions. Some argue that hunger sharpened the mind, making dreams more vivid. Others suggest exhaustion simply made sleep deeper, producing intense imagery. Whatever the cause, winter dreams often carried a power that lingered long after eyes opened. Now you dream of animals moving across snow. A fox darts, leaving a trail that glows faintly. A bison snorts, its breath turning into stars that rise skyward. An owl flies low, wings stirring snow, its cry echoing both in air and in your chest. You sense each animal is not random but chosen, each carrying meaning specific to you. You stretch your hand to touch them, and your fingers brush light, not fur. One peculiar belief recorded in some regions is that dream animals could lend qualities to the dreamer: strength from bear, speed from deer, cunning from fox. Waking after such visions, people felt imbued with those traits, as though the night had trained them as surely as any game in snow. Imagine rising from sleep with muscles taut, heart fast, convinced you carry the speed of deer in your veins. The soundscape of the lodge blends with your dream. A sleeper coughs, and in vision it becomes a thunderclap. A dog whines, and in dream it transforms into wolf song. Embers crackle, and in your vision fire spreads across the horizon. The line between dream and reality blurs until you cannot tell which is which. Touch deepens the dream further. You feel warmth on your chest, perhaps a hand, perhaps only imagined. You feel snowflakes on your face, melting instantly, though you are beneath hides. Each touch is both waking and dreaming, layered until distinction loses meaning. An odd custom reported by some ethnographers is that children were sometimes asked deliberately to dream on behalf of families. Given charms or whispered instructions, they were told to see where game might be found or whether journeys would be safe. Whether or not their visions proved accurate, the practice gave children a sense of power, making them active participants in survival. Scholars debate whether dreams were truly believed to alter outcomes or whether they functioned more as morale-hopeful stories to ease fear. Perhaps both. For when you wake hungry, cold, uncertain, even the faintest promise of guidance can steady your heart. You drift deeper into dream. The river beneath ice glows brighter, the cracks widening. A figure rises from the water, half human, half animal, eyes shining. It points north, its gesture both command and comfort. You follow, feeling your feet glide effortlessly, your body weightless. The journey feels endless yet effortless, as though you are carried on wind. And then, abruptly, you wake. The lodge is dim, dawn faint outside. Smoke drifts lazily upward, dogs stir, children mumble in sleep. For a moment, confusion grips you. Is the vision real? Did you truly walk the frozen river? You touch your chest where warmth lingered, and it feels as though something still presses there, unseen but undeniable. You whisper your dream to the one nearest you. Their eyes widen, then narrow thoughtfully. They nod, pressing a charm into your hand, whispering, "Follow it when the time comes." The dream has become more than fantasy, it is part of survival now, guiding choices yet to be made. And as you curl back into hides, your mind shifts again, carrying you not only through dreams but into the very tools that preserve them, memory itself. For winter survival did not depend only on fire, food, or hides. It also rested on the ability to remember songs, trails, rituals without which survival itself would vanish into snow. The dream still clings to you like frost on lashes, but as the lodge brightens with dawn, another power awakens memory. You lie on your pine bedding, listening to the creak of logs in the fire, and realize that without memory, all else would scatter like snow in wind. Fire dies if you forget where wood is stored. Trails vanish if you forget which star points north. Stories fade if no one repeats them. Memory is the invisible cord binding survival together. It is firmly established that oral tradition served as both archive and guide among native peoples. In winter, when nights stretched long and work slowed, memory was trained and tested. Elders recited genealogies, recounted hunts, sang songs whose rhythms preserved directions and laws. Children repeated words aloud, over and over, until they stuck like burrs in the mind. To forget was dangerous, to remember was strength. One curious note from early missionaries recounts that some families marked stories with small objects, stones, sticks, feathers arranged as cues. Each item prompted the next verse or tale, ensuring nothing slipped away. To an outsider, it looked like play with scraps. To those within, it was a library in miniature. You can imagine an elder's hand hovering over a row of tokens, each one unlocking a memory stored in voice. Scholars remain divided on whether memory was trained through strict rote recitation or through freer storytelling. Some argue precision was paramount, every word guarded like treasure. Others suggest stories evolved slightly each telling, shifting like snowdrifts while keeping their shape. Perhaps both are true, the skeleton unchanging, the flesh adapting to the moment. Now you lean closer in imagination, listening as memory unfolds around the fire. An elder chants a lineage, names rolling like a drumbeat, parent, child, grandchild, back through generations. Each name anchors the present, tying the living to the dead. Children sit wide-eyed, repeating names softly, their voices tentative but eager. They are weaving themselves into memory's chain. The sensory details of memory are rich. The crackle of fire punctuates phrases, embers flaring with each pause. Smoke drifts upward, carrying words like offerings to the sky. The air smells of resin and fir, mingling with the scent of warm breath in the crowded lodge. Your ears strain to catch every syllable, knowing that each one matters, each one a key to survival. Touch is part of remembering too. You feel the smoothness of carved tokens passed hand to hand, the ridges of notched sticks that count winters, the rough grain of bark inscribed with marks. Your fingers trace them and memory sharpens, as though the body itself recalls what the mind alone might forget. One unusual anecdote from travelers tells of snow itself being used as a memory aid. Hunters drew maps in drifts with sticks, marking rivers, mountains, trails. The snow held their lessons long enough for others to see, before wind erased them. Teaching was fleeting, but the mind retained the image. Imagine kneeling in a circle, tracing lines into white, the snow glimmering beneath torchlight as the future path unfolded. Researchers continue to discuss whether such practices constituted a written language of sorts. Some argue these ephemeral maps and tokens were proto-writing, while others insist they were purely mnemonic devices. The boundary is hazy, but the effect is clear. Memory was externalized, anchored in objects and gestures as much as in voice. You close your eyes now, repeating a phrase whispered by an elder. The words are rhythmic, easy to recall. Your tongue shapes them again and again until they feel natural, inevitable. Soon you could recite them even in sleep. This is how memory worked, not passive but active, each body a vessel trained to hold and transmit knowledge. The tactile sensation deepens as you grip a carved stick, notches cut along its side. Each groove marks a year, each wider space, a great event, famine, war, migration. Your thumb moves along them, and the story comes back. The wood is not just wood. It is a calendar, a teacher, a reminder that time itself must be remembered to be survived. One peculiar tradition described in oral histories is that mistakes in recitation were sometimes corrected not with scolding, but with laughter. Elders would chuckle, children would blush, and then the story would be told again properly. The laughter softened correction, making memory a communal task rather than solitary burden. You can almost hear the chuckles now, gentle but firm, guiding young voices toward accuracy. Scholars still argue about how much flexibility stories were allowed. Some insist change weakened memory. Others claim adaptation kept stories alive. Perhaps the balance lay in repetition of key truths, laws, directions, warnings, while embellishments shifted like snow patterns. What mattered was not exact wording but enduring lesson. The lodge fills with voices repeating together. The chant grows like a song, steady and low, echoing in hides and bones alike. It becomes more than practice, it becomes comfort. Memory, rehearsed communally, feels like warmth. Each word a coal, each repetition a spark, together keeping the fire of survival alive. You sense how fragile yet strong this system is. Fragile, because one break in the chain of memory could scatter knowledge. Strong, because every child, every elder, every adult becomes part of that chain. The community itself is the library, breathing and speaking. The fire burns low, but memory glows brighter. Your body relaxes, soothed by the rhythm of recitation. Outside, snow falls silently, blanketing the world, erasing trails. But inside, no trail is truly lost. Not while voices remember, not while tokens prompt, not while stories are told. And as your eyes close again, another image forms. Not words, not sticks, but figures painted directly onto skin. Patterns of lines and symbols inked or burned into flesh, marking bodies with reminders no storm could erase. Memory carved into living skin, carried day and night. The story shifts seamlessly now, from memory recited aloud to memory worn upon the body, guiding sleepers even when voices fall silent. The fire dwindles to embers, and yet another form of remembrance stirs in the half-dark. You notice it first on the arms of the person beside you, faint lines etched in skin, some blackened, some raised with scars, some fading with age. Memory here is not spoken or sung, but worn, carved into flesh itself, carried wherever the body walks. These are tattoos and scar patterns, not merely decoration, but records, promises, and protections. It is widely acknowledged that many native peoples used body markings to preserve identity and meaning. In harsh winters, when voices might be silenced and tokens lost, skin itself became a canvas of continuity. Tattoos marked lineages, victories, or spiritual guardians. Scars arranged in patterns spoke of trials endured, hunts survived, storms weathered. To look at another's skin was to read part of their story, wordless but clear. One curious account from early explorers describes hunters tattooing small dots across their knuckles, each dot representing a season survived. Outsiders dismissed it as crude, but for those who bore the marks, each dot was proof flesh had endured, bone had not broken, life had triumphed over cold. Imagine warming your hands before fire and seeing them sparkle with ink, each mark a bead of memory strung across skin. Interpretations differ among historians about the function of these markings. Some argue they were purely symbolic, carrying spiritual or social weight. Others maintain they had practical purposes, believed to guard against frostbite or ward off illness. The truth may be layered, spirit and body bound together, faith strengthening flesh as surely as fur or fire. You reach in imagination to trace one of these lines. The skin feels rough where scar tissue has risen, smooth where ink has settled deep. The warmth of body contrasts with the cold air, making the markings seem alive, pulsing faintly with heat. You imagine sleeping with such symbols pressed close to your heart, reminders that you are part of something larger than your individual breath. The soundscape of this practice is muted but powerful. You hear the scratch of bone needles pricking skin, the muffled gasp of someone bearing pain, the soft chant of encouragement from others nearby. Later, the sound shifts to laughter companions teasing the newly marked, calling them braver, stronger, more complete. Pain is memory's ink, but community eases it. Smell joins the scene. The pungent odor of soot mixed with fat, the acrid tang of burned wood used to make pigment, the metallic scent of blood briefly drawn. The mixture is not pleasant, yet it clings to you, sharp and unforgettable. Even long after, each mark carries not only sight but scent, the memory of its making sealed into sense. One unusual anecdote from oral history tells of patterns carved into skin not for individuals, but for whole families. Each member bore the same symbol, small and discreet, so that even if scattered by storm or war, they would be recognized upon reunion. You can almost picture the relief of finding kin by torchlight, eyes falling upon familiar scars, no words needed. Researchers still debate whether these body markings were permanent guides or seasonal reminders. Some argue they lasted a lifetime, proud declarations. Others suggest temporary staining and ritual scarification renewed each winter, fading with spring thaw. Whatever the truth, the body itself became a ledger of endurance, updated by season and survival. You close your eyes and imagine lying down after being newly marked. The sting of fresh tattoos burns against hides, each shift painful. Yet in time, the pain eases into pride. Your fingers trace the swelling, and you know you carry a story no snow can erase. When you drift into sleep, the markings remain awake, keeping watch even in dreams. One peculiar custom described in northern reports is that certain tattoos were believed to glow faintly in firelight, as if spirits themselves illuminated them. Perhaps it was only oil glistening on skin, but to those present, it was proof of power. Imagine a body shimmering in dim lodge light, lines flickering like constellations on flesh, as though the stars themselves had descended to mark survival. Academic voices remain divided on whether tattoos were primarily personal identity or communal signal. Some insist they marked individuals alone. Others argue they created unity, a shared map across many bodies. As you look around the lodge in imagination, you see both, some patterns unique, others echoed across kin. Flesh becomes both page and mirror, recording both self and community. The tactile sensation of such marks lingers. Even years later, cold makes scar tissue ache, reminding you of trials endured. Inked lines sometimes itch in dry air, tugging you back to the day of their making. Memory here is not distant, it is felt, carried in nerves and bone, a constant companion through every season. One odd little note from explorers claimed that hunters pressed snow directly onto fresh tattoos to numb pain. The cold bit savagely, yet it soothed the fire of the needle. For a moment, snow and skin forged truce, one burn countering another. You can almost feel it now, the sting of ice against raw flesh, pain layered upon pain until relief arrives. And when the lodge settles into silence again, bodies curl together beneath hides. Those with markings rest differently. They do not only sleep, they keep vigil through their own flesh. Patterns on skin whisper to spirits, reminding them, this one remembers, this one belongs, this one has endured. You sense now how memory moves in cycles, words spoken by mouth, stories etched into objects, images drawn in snow, and finally, lines carried on bodies. Each method is a layer, none alone sufficient, but together creating resilience that no blizzard can erase. As you drift once more into slumber in imagination, the lines on skin seem to blur into larger patterns. They echo the stars overhead, constellations mirrored in flesh. The body itself becomes a map of the sky, winter survival written both above and below. And so your thoughts glide forward again, from tattoos on skin to the very clothing that covers it. Not only memory, but survival is carried in what people wore, garments sewn from fur and hide, layered with ingenuity, sometimes adorned with meaning. To step into winter was to step inside a second body, crafted from the animals that shared the land. The story flows now from marks beneath hides to the hides themselves, preparing you to explore how clothing became not just barrier against cold, but canvas of culture, carrying memory and spirit outward into the snow. The memory of markings on skin lingers, but now your eyes shift to the coverings drawn over that skin, garments of hide and fur that shield bodies from the frozen air. You sit once more in the lodge, and as dawn filters faintly through the flap, people begin to stir. They reach for clothing not out of vanity but out of necessity, yet what they put on speaks volumes. Winter is too severe for mere fabric. It demands ingenuity stitched into every seam, spirit sewn into every fold. It is consistently recorded that winter garments across native nations were masterpieces of adaptation. Deer, elk, moose, and caribou provided hides for trousers and coats. Beaver, rabbit, and fox offered dense pelts for trimming hoods and boots. Buffalo hides, heavy and broad, became cloaks or robes, layered to trap heat. Clothing was not made lightly. Each piece was born from animal life, honored and transformed into a second body that carried humans safely through storms. One curious note in ethnographic records reveals that some groups stitched moss or dried grass into boots as insulation, creating what we might now call the earliest socks. Imagine sliding your feet into such boots, feeling the spring of dried fibers against your skin, the warmth it traps, the faint earthy smell rising each time you walk, a forest at your feet, carrying you through snow. Scholars remain divided on how much artistry versus practicality dominated winter clothing. Some argue designs were purely functional, every stitch aimed at survival. Others point to intricate beadwork, dyed quills, and patterns sewn even on the warmest garments, suggesting that beauty was as essential as warmth. Perhaps both are true. Protection from cold and expression of identity woven together, each inseparable from the other. You reach in imagination to pull on a robe. The fur is heavy, pressing on your shoulders like a friendly hand. The inner hide feels smooth, slightly oily, sliding against your skin. As you tie the robe closed with sinew cord, warmth begins to build instantly. Outside, frost thickens on branches, but inside your cocoon of hide, the air feels bearable, even soft. The soundscape of dressing is full of small details. The creak of leather as you bend, the hiss of fur brushing against fur, the snap of sinew thread pulled tight. Children laugh as they wrestle with oversized mittens, dogs shake and paw at the snow still clinging to them. Elders hum softly while adjusting ties. Getting dressed is not simply routine, it is ritual, the daily rebuilding of armor against the cold. Smells join the act. Tanned hides carry pungent notes of smoke and fat, remnants of the process that made them supple. Fur smells of animal musk, faint but present, a reminder of the life given. Pine resin used in treatment clings faintly, sharper and cleaner, mingling with the heavy scents. Each inhalation tells you where your clothing came from. Forest, hunt, fire. One unusual custom described in explorer journals is the practice of decorating even hidden linings with symbols. Patterns sewn on the inside of garments were not visible to outsiders, but carried spiritual meaning for the wearer. Imagine pulling on a coat and knowing that unseen beneath the fur lies a line of stitched figures, animals, stars, guardians touching your skin, whispering silently, "You are not alone." The tactile sensations are profound. Gloves lined with fur envelop your fingers, each movement cushioned and warm. Boots hug your feet tightly, grass or moss padding the sole, turning snow from enemy to neutral ground. A hood trimmed with rabbit fur brushes your cheeks, soft and ticklish, yet protective. Every part of your body feels swaddled, not smothered, but embraced by layers crafted with skill and care. Researchers discuss whether clothing varied more by gender or by role. Some evidence shows hunters wore streamlined garments designed for movement, while women tending lodges used heavier robes suited for long stillness indoors. Others argue the differences were minimal, survival dictating uniform solutions. Whatever the variations, the ingenuity is undeniable. Every stitch a calculation, every layer a promise. You imagine stepping outside now, fully dressed. The cold slams against you, but instead of piercing, it rebounds. Your breath fogs, yet your chest stays warm. Your feet sink into snow, but the padding within boots shields them from chill. You pull your hood tighter, and suddenly the world shrinks to a warm tunnel framed in fur. The storm loses some of its teeth. One peculiar anecdote from oral accounts tells of children wrapped so tightly in furs that they resembled small bundles more than humans. Parents joked they looked like rolls of fat or little bears, waddling stiffly but warmly. The laughter eased the harshness of winter, reminding everyone that protection could be playful. Scholars still debate the symbolic role of adornments on clothing. Were beads and quills simply artistry, or did patterns encode clan identity, spiritual meaning, or even practical markers of ownership? Some argue for aesthetics, others for deep symbolism. Looking at garments shimmering in firelight, you sense both, beauty for beauty's sake, and beauty as language. The sounds of movement outside confirm survival. Boots crunch steadily, coats rustle, dogs bark as sleds creak forward. Each noise is muffled by snow, yet together they form the heartbeat of camp in motion. Clothing allows this rhythm. Without it, silence would reign, broken only by the stillness of frost over bodies. The tactile presence of clothing continues to comfort. Inside the lodge again, you loosen cords and feel warmth spill out. Your robe grows heavy with melted frost, damp but still protective. You rub your hands over fur, drying them, inhaling the earthy musk, thanking silently the animals that made this barrier possible. Gratitude is stitched into every seam. One odd little detail noted in explorer writings is that some furs were deliberately left with tails or paws attached, dangling like charms. These remnants were not wasteful but protective, believed to carry the animal's spirit with the wearer. Picture a hood edged with foxtails swaying as you walk, each movement a reminder that you are never alone in the cold. The debate among academics continues about whether clothing innovations were shared widely between groups or developed separately. Some argue for diffusion, knowledge passed through trade and contact. Others insist each community adapted independently to its environment. The truth may be both, but what matters is clear. Humans found ways to transform nature into armor, culture, and art, ensuring survival in places where otherwise nobody could endure. You lie down again beneath hides, the weight of garments still pressing comfortably on your shoulders. Your hands stroke fur absent-mindedly. Your cheek rests against soft pelt, your body encased in warmth. Outside, frost glitters under moonlight, but inside, you are secure. Clothing here is not only protection, it is memory, spirit, story all carried outward into the snow. And as your eyes flutter, you realize clothing is only part of a larger shield. Beyond hides and furs, there are weapons tools not only for hunting but for defense against predators, against storms, against hunger. The line between garment and tool blurs, each one shaping the body into something more resilient. The story begins to shift, flowing from the softness of fur on skin to the hardness of wood, stone, and bone in hand. You are about to feel how weapons, too, became companions in winter, not only in hunting but in preserving life against cold itself. The weight of fur still lingers on your shoulders, but now your hands itch for something solid, tools that bite, weapons that protect, instruments as essential to winter as fire or food. You step outside the lodge once more, boots sinking into powder, and there they are. Bows leaned against sleds, spears tipped with bone, axes gleaming faintly in the cold dawn. They are not ornaments. They are survival given shape. It is well documented in both archaeological findings and oral traditions that weapons were more than instruments of war. In winter especially, they meant the difference between hunger and plenty, between warmth and freezing. A bow carried across the shoulder was not only a hunter's pride, it was the lodge's next meal. The fur that would be sewn into boots, the sinew that would stitch a wound. Each weapon was a lifeline. One curious observation from explorer accounts tells of snow knives carved from bone, sharp enough to slice blocks for shelters or scrape hides clean. To outsiders they seemed crude, yet in skilled hands they shaped homes and clothing alike. Imagine gripping one, the bone smooth yet biting, its edge cutting snow into bricks that soon rose into protective walls. A house built by blade, more enduring than any fortress of stone in such conditions. Debate persists among scholars about how weapons blurred into tools. Was an axe primarily for felling trees or for defense? Was a spear meant for fish under ice or for wolves circling camp? The truth is slippery, because survival demanded flexibility. One object could mean many lives, firewood, food, or safety depending on the need. You hold a bow now in imagination. Its sinew string creaks in the cold, taut as frost. Your gloves grip smooth wood, polished by years of use. The arrow's tip glimmers faintly, stone chipped to a fine edge. You draw, and the bow hums with tension, a vibration that travels into your chest. Even without loosing it, the sound reassures you. Power is ready, resting in your hands. The sensory world of weapons is vivid. You hear the thunk of axe against wood, rhythm steady as a drum. You smell the resin released by pine, sticky and sweet, mingling with smoke on the air. You feel the shock travel up your arms with every swing, numbing yet satisfying. Each blow is a heartbeat of survival, wood splitting into fire that will chase frost away. One unusual detail preserved in stories tells of arrows fletched with feathers dyed bright colors, not for decoration alone but to see them better against white snow. A shaft flashing red or yellow was easier to retrieve after a miss. Beauty and practicality joined in flight. Imagine a line of hunters bending bows, arrows shimmering with hues like fragments of summer caught in winter sky. Scholars continue to discuss whether winter hunting relied more on stealth or endurance. Some argue hunters crept silently, boughs raised, shadows merging with trees. Others insist success came from driving game into deep snow, exhausting it until spears struck true. Both methods likely intertwined, each chosen by circumstance. What is certain? Weapons were extensions of body and mind, sharpened by necessity. The tactile closeness of such tools cannot be ignored. A knife rests in your mitten, hilt wrapped in hide, warm from your palm. A spear's shaft leans against your shoulder, weight reassuring. Each touch is both comfort and reminder. You are never defenseless, never entirely at mercy of the cold. One peculiar anecdote describes how some carried tiny carved replicas of their weapons as charms. Miniature bows tucked into pouches, small knives hung from cords. They believed the spirit of the full weapon lived inside its likeness, granting luck even when the real thing was not in hand. Children clutched these toys, learning reverence before learning skill. Academic voices disagree about whether weapons held ritual significance equal to daily use. Some say they were purely practical, sharpened and swung with no ceremony. Others argue that before hunts, weapons were spoken to, honored, even sung over. Watching in imagination, you see both possibilities merge. A hunter running fingers along a spear, whispering thanks before stepping into snow. The soundscape of preparation is lively. Sinew stretches and snaps as strings are tightened. Stone chips ring faintly under hammer blows, each strike shaping an edge. Fires hiss as resin boils, sealing wood against damp. Voices murmur, children laugh, dogs bark impatiently. It is a chorus of survival, every note leading toward action. The smell of weapons is distinctive. Fresh wood, sharp and green. Bone polished smooth, faintly sweet. Stone dust dry and metallic. Smoke from sealing fires, pungent and acrid. Even before use, the scent is alive, promising what these tools will bring: food, warmth, endurance. The tactile lessons echo. You run your hand along a spear, smooth until you reach the carved grip where fingers naturally fit. You test an arrow's fletching, feathers soft yet rigid enough to guide its path. You swing an axe, the handle roughened with years of palms, grooves forming where ancestors once gripped. These are not objects. They are companions, carrying history in their fibers. One odd little tradition mentioned in traveler notes is the habit of sharpening blades by moonlight. Hunters claimed edges honed under stars, cut cleaner, truer. Whether practical or poetic, the ritual bound weapon to sky, stone to spirit. You picture a figure kneeling in snow, moon glowing on blade, the act silent yet sacred. The debate among ethnographers persists. Were these tools innovations unique to each region, or did knowledge spread widely through trade and migration? Some evidence suggests exchange of designs, arrowheads carried hundreds of miles, sinew methods shared. Others see independent invention, necessity birthing similar forms in different places. Either way, the result is clear. Weapons became lifelines, diverse yet unified in purpose. Now you watch as hunters step from the lodge, armed and ready. Bows slung, spears raised, axes strapped. Their silhouettes are stark against snow, breath pluming like smoke. Dogs strain at harnesses, sleds creak. The group moves as one. Every tool carried is promise of food to return, of warmth to sustain, of survival to continue. The tactile sense sharpens one final time. You grasp the haft of an axe, the hilt of a knife, the string of a bow. Each feels alive, buzzing faintly in your palm. The storm may rise, the cold may bite, but you are not empty-handed. You are armed with memory, skill, and faith bound into wood and stone. And as evening falls again, hunters return, their sleds laden with meat, their robes thickened with new furs. The weapons rest once more by the door, silent but steady, guardians of life. You lie beneath hides, listening to the crackle of fire, feeling the weight of security. Winter has tested every fiber lodge: fire, story, charm, clothing, weapon. Yet through each test, life continues, warmed by ingenuity, protected by spirit, remembered through dream. The story begins to soften now. Your breath slows, your body eases. The rhythm of survival fades into the rhythm of rest. For though the harsh winter stretches still outside, within this lodge of words and memory, you are safe. And so, listener, you have walked through storms and silence, through snow houses and dances, through dreams and weapons. You have felt hides against your skin, tasted smoke on your tongue, heard the hush of blizzards and the laughter of children in drifts. You have seen stars overhead and marks on skin below, both guiding, both enduring. Now the tale quiets, as all stories must. Picture the fire dwindling to soft embers, glowing faintly against the dark. Hear the last sighs of dogs curling close, their warmth pressed against human feet. Feel the heavy hides settle over your body, cocooning you, shutting out the sharp edge of night air. The world outside may be fierce, but here, inside, the cold is powerless. Breathe slowly. Inhale the faint scent of pine and smoke. Exhale the weariness of travel. Each breath steadies, longer, calmer, softer. Your heartbeat slows to match the rhythm of wind beyond the lodge, steady, unhurried. The stars overhead wheel silently, patient and eternal. They do not demand your eyes tonight. They simply wait, shining, steady, constant. Let them watch for you while you rest. Let them guard your dreams, as they have guarded countless others before you. And if snow falls again while you sleep, let it fall gently, blanketing the world in quiet, smoothing every sound into hush. In that hush, you are safe, you are held, you are warm. So now, dear listener, let your eyes close fully, let your body sink deeper, let the weight of history and story soothe you. Rest, knowing you have walked through the winter and endured. Good night, sleep deeply, dream warmly. Until next time.